Look what happens when I'm not here.
Purposefully.
That's what it says.
Okay.
There it comes.
Oh, the light is on.
There it is.
Okay, all right, thank you, Lisa. Goodbye.
And it's live in black and white.
I'll try to remember that.
It's even worse.
Oh, really? Okay,
That's
yeah,
worse.
I'll leave my phone
We
out.
can just turn it off. That's worse.
Oh, wow.
But he's one I hadn't talked with yet, so that was never, haven't got a hold of him.
Yeah, it's live. It's just,
Thank you.
see,
Okay,
you just barely got up to come over, so it's only 10 seconds behind it. Oh, okay, well, we just go with it.
okay.
We ready?
All right, I think we're in business.
Okay. City Council meeting for Centerville City, April 17th is now in session. Sorry about the little delay. We were trying to get our YouTube going and thought we wouldn't be able to. We'd have to have it on audio to replay later, but we got it going. So we're set to go. And we welcome everyone that's here tonight. Let's do a roll call vote to make sure we're here, starting with Councilwoman Ivy at the end.
Here.
Here?
Here.
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 All 5 council members here, so we're set. Let's start tonight with the prayer thought, and we're honored to have Pastor Lauren Pankratz with us from the Bridge community.
It's great to be here. Thank you guys for all you do for our city. I know there's a lot of stuff on the agenda today that affects everybody here, so we're grateful that you guys are here talking about it and getting things worked out. Let's just pray. You guys would. Father in heaven, you are beautiful beyond description, and you're just too much even for our words. But God, we're grateful. We're grateful for the love you have for us. We're grateful for this beautiful place that we get to live. Lord, what a blessing that is. God, I'm grateful today for these men and women who serve our city so faithfully and diligently. And Lord, I'm sure they have many other things that they could be doing, many other things that are on their mind, but tonight they're coming and they're deciding things and weighing options and things that will benefit and affect so many in our city. Lord, I pray that today you give them just tremendous wisdom, Lord, for those decisions. That, God, you'd help them to see the choices available, what's the wisest course of action, what's the best means to an end that helps the most. God, I pray that you would even open up new options or new opportunities that give them great insight, Lord. We're grateful for the numerous men and women who have come before us, God, who have done so much work to make this just an enjoyable place to live, and we're grateful, God, again, for those servants that are here serving our city. Pray for just for energy and stamina and patience and endurance and wisdom today. We ask this in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I appreciate it. We need that blessing. Let's go next to, if you would all join with us up here and standing and doing the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first thing we have on the agenda tonight is the open session. This is where anyone can come to these 2 microphones with anything that they may want to bring before the council. And if you're going to do that, just try and keep your comments to around 2 minutes. And so anyone that wants to do that is now welcome to come to either of these 2 mics. And state your name and where you're from would be great. Thank you.
My name is Andrea Richmond. I live at 327 Windsor Lane in Centerville, and I appreciate your time. I'm a resident of Centerville now for about 26 years, and recently my world has been rocked a little bit. There is a home that is adjacent. It's on 2 acres adjacent to my backyard, and there has not been any horses there or animals at all for over 40 years. And suddenly we have a bunch of goats and a horse. And I am allergic to horses. 3 other members of my family, we get asthma from horses. I mean, I can go on and on and on about how a horse right next to your property can make it a completely different experience. And it's not like the horse is away. I just wanted to stay friends with my neighbors. I don't know them. I'm sure they're good people, but I asked them if they could just please not put it next to my vinyl fence. And they chose to put it as close to my home as they possibly could on their 2 acres, which has been very concerning for me and my family. It makes me, frankly, want to move. And I would love to stay here until my husband and I croak, but it just has not been a good experience. And so I am asking if I can have a taller fence on my borderline than what I have now, because their horse can literally, first off, my vinyl fence cannot support a horse if anything happens over there. And their horse has the ability to put his head in my yard. And it's right by, our swings and everything. So that is what I'm requesting tonight. I'm trying to make my backyard usable and livable with a horse right next to my whole entire house, as possibly close as it can be when they have 2 acres. So I just wanted to state my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Did we get where she was at and her address? And
I think we know where that is.
okay, great. Thanks for your comments. Appreciate it. Any other open session comments?
Hello, I'm Laureen Kamalu, visiting from Kaysville and going around to all of the different city councils throughout our county because I'm running for county commissioner in seat B. And we know Centerville well. My family's lived in Kaysville for 22 years. So we've had soccer here and shopping here and eating peaches from here and lots of things. I feel like we're definitely neighbors in our communities. I'm in public service as well, serving right now in my 5th year as a planning commissioner. So some of those changes that Centerville and Kaysville have had over the years and the time that we've lived here, I certainly understand the challenges of changes and how important it is for your zoning and for all of you who serve. So what you're doing, I very much respect. You have obviously a mind to be in service. So trying to think what else would be good to share. I am, because I felt really strongly about service, finishing up a master's degree in public administration from the University of Utah. I never thought I'd go back to school. Business was my background, and it's been a good experience to go back and learn a ton about policy, finance, budgets, everything from the public side of things. And so I walk on May 3rd, which is exciting to be able to finish that. And we're just grateful for your community. You have great people and a great community, and thank you so much for your service. Reach out to me if you have questions about my campaign.
Thank you for being here. Any other comments? Anyone else for the open session? Thank you. If not, we will close the open session. We will move to...
Mayor, after closing the open session, can I ask a question relative to Andrea's comments while she's still here from Corey?
Thank you. You may, Councilman McEwen.
You came in late, so I'm not sure if you heard the entire situation or not, Corey, relative to a residential property and agricultural property that are directly in conflict because of a horse. Is there any buffering that's required when you are agro right up against a residential? Can you put animals right up to the property line?
Yes.
Okay.
So Corey, I would like to ask what it is we would need to do to maybe look at giving her a higher fence that the horse couldn't come across, maybe against something against agricultural, allowing a little bit of higher fence?
Yeah, as we discussed when you called me, you know, there's a value in the backyard privacy. So we see that tension, you know, a lot around, from not just horses, but development, hillside development into the backyard. So backyards are certainly a place where people would desire some privacy from that. The current code is the 6 foot. Generally what the 6 foot is centered around for now is a lot of your materials, your pre-made materials, come in the 6 foot increments. And that's what you usually see. And so a lot of zoning ordinances limit things to 6 feet. The building code actually allows without a permit up to 7 feet, but you usually don't find 7 foot materials available for purchase. After you reach 7 feet, if you go above the 7 feet, the building code kicks in, and there has to be a specific design criteria met under the code. It can be a custom engineered fence. It also can be one that has a structural integrity meeting the code in order to handle the wind loads, and particularly as you get higher, you're susceptible to failure of that fence. And often they go to a block system, and that needs to be reinforced for some type of block system to have a fence that high. As I indicated, you know, there are options to consider. Our residential medium zone in the side and rear yards do allow a higher fence with the commission review and approval of those higher fences as a kind of a buffer between the multifamily and the single family. So in this case, if you wanted to consider that, I think there is some discussion that could look at what higher fence that could serve as a buffer between particularly agricultural properties that may have different sorts of animals, but adjacent to those zones to agriculture. Agriculture is quite protected under state law. So there is a deference to the agricultural uses as a whole, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't look at some system to establish a buffer. The buffer valuations could be vegetation to those fences. I think it's reasonable to consider, to some extent, with animals, particularly of large, the type of fencing used for containment. I don't believe we're in an open range situation in our area. So I think there's value to consider that and where we land. I would be concerned about some of the rumors of 12-foot fences. I think structurally, as well as a threat to an adjacent property owner with such a high fence would be a concern. But I think there's room to have that discussion if the council wanted to do that.
Thanks, and that helps.
So I would like to, I don't know exactly what I want to say, but I would like to ask the council if we have the support to ask staff to start the process and see if we can get a fence that's higher next to agricultural.
Yeah, and the process is the council can request. It would take a majority vote to sponsor that discussion and direct staff to prepare a text amendment and have the Planning Commission staff and Planning Commission weigh in on that, discuss that, hold the hearings and discussions necessary, and then bring a recommendation to the council. So if there's a majority for it, that would be how you initiate a zone text amendment.
So before we jump to that, I wonder, I know that we have made exceptions in the past. So for instance, Porter Lane, higher fences were allowed. So is there already an existing process?
They're not higher fences at Porter Lane. They're just allowed to fence in a double frontage lot. So it's not a higher fence.
But I think, so there is a ordinance though that allows fences up to 10 feet tall, is it with a CUP or
Yeah.
something?
In the residential medium zone.
So in the, yeah, it says that the planning commission can approve a fence up to 10 feet in the rear yard or side yard of the AM, so ag medium, RM, RH, et cetera. So the zone that's excluded from that is the RL.
And the AL.
And the AL. So,
Correct.
yeah,
So the vehicle may already exist.
It might be as simple as adding in
To
the
do that.
RL and the AM.
I'm hesitant to have the council say, do this.
Right, of
Rather than
course.
analyzing
Yeah.
it, but.
Yeah, I think it would be more, to direct staff to look at that issue with the large animals in agricultural zones and the adjacent zones that might be a part of that. And
I just had a
come up with a
recollection of the
recommendation.
discussion on Porter Lane when we put in the berm. And so the neighbors were complaining that people walking along the berm, their fence was not 6 feet tall on that side.
Yeah, it was a double frontage lot issue where the 4 foot to the 6 foot, and they're limited at 6 foot right now.
Okay.
So is that something, Corey, that the staff would look at, or the staff and planning commission?
It
or-
would involve both, because any text amendment is required to be
Yeah.
processed through a recommendation to the commission.
But it would need to be applicant-driven on this.
Applicant or the council with a majority vote can initiate
But
a
can't she
change.
be isn't that what she more or less is
Right, so
tonight,
she
is
would
the
apply for a
applicant?
text amendment if that's.
Yeah, so I think that would be good to have her be the applicant and.
Yeah, that's up to you.
But it sounds like the vehicle already exists if RM zoning allows up to 10 feet with a CUP, right?
RM, but
RM.
Not
What-
RL.
what is her property?
You're in
zone?
RM, aren't you?
No,
She's in an RL zone
said
adjacent to
RL?
an AL zone.
Okay, I thought it was RM over there. Okay.
No.
Well, I think it's something that's worth looking at. The issue I see is we have diminishing agricultural spaces anyway, and I don't want to drive that any lower. I'd like to see those preserved, but peaceful coexistence is the thing that needs to be looked at and how that's possible. Because the worst thing we can do is drive all agricultural out of the community, because that just then becomes the density driver and everything else that we're concerned about. But given the situation here, I can see where some sort of accommodations should be looked at relative to whatever that buffering can be.
We also want to look at the issue of, as land is converted to RL, what then becomes the case.
Right. So I think it's both.
I'd be supportive of that as well.
So the issue would be is that the direction is either an applicant sponsored one, which you've discussed. The citizen can petition its government to consider change. The council can also initiate one if you reach a majority
I know
vote.
this isn't on our agenda, but would it be inappropriate to just make a motion right now to direct staff to look
I
into that
think you
and
can
start that
direct
process?
staff to look at items.
I make a motion that we direct staff to start that process.
I second that.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll note that in our minutes and initiate that process.
Thank you so very much.
Okay, on to the minutes review and acceptance. This is from the April 3rd City Council meeting, and they are in your packet. So discussion on the minutes, changes, comments?
I had one change. Page 2, line 33, the sentence says that same restriction has not been set for commercial development and thus the area may become primarily commercial. That wasn't my concern because the area is primarily commercial already. So to be clear, the concern was thus small pockets of the area might be redeveloped, with leaving large areas not redeveloped, continuing to blight. And if small pockets are redeveloped, then it might make the transition harder. That was my concern.
And I'm fine keeping 35 and 36 the same. I'm agreeing with the
Yes,
same concern.
thank you.
So we're okay with those changes? Any further comments?
And then you also have the closed meeting, and if you have any changes for that, do those need to be just handled but in writing, Lisa, passed over in writing, or what?
Well, if
Since
you have some comments, it depends.
Depends on what it is, right?
Yeah. If
Okay.
they're vague, go ahead.
I didn't have any changes.
I've reviewed
I thought it was
them,
fine.
I'm fine with them.
Okay.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as filed.
I'll second that.
That's with the proposed change,
With-
right?
Yeah, with the proposed changed.
Talking both sets, right?
Yes.
Both sets.
All right, we have a motion with the proposed changes, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next on to our summary action calendar, and we had 4 items there. I need some clarification about the second item.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We did put a correction, get a correction on Novus today, but if you didn't notice it, I wanted to point it out. For item B, we had a wrong amount in the document from the city engineer, and that's been corrected now. He submitted a new document today recommending the release of the remaining bond amount of $33,754 rather than the number you may have seen of $45,000 some odd dollars. So want that correction to be a part of your, that will be understood if you approve this.
So, go ahead.
That's it. That's it.
Oh, I thought I heard comment here to my right. So, summary action calendar with that change on the terminate warranty for Legacy Trail subdivision. Do we have a motion to accept the summary action calendar?
Yes, I would make a motion to accept the items on the summary action calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. Next item on the agenda is the bid award for labor for the miscellaneous water lateral replacements project, and that is something that our city attorney, Lisa Romney, is going to address.
Well, actually, I can address that. Lisa's going to take another one later.
I'll punt it back to you, Steve.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry.
This is the one I told you in the staff report was opening today because there was confusion about the bid opening date. So that did open today. It's been attached to Novus. I guess I'm not paying attention to my other job over here on the projection. Let's see, right there. Okay. Oops, that's the, excuse me, I'm on the wrong one. Go back to, you'll be glad to get Jake back.
You're just trying to make us see how important he is.
Okay, let's click on this one. So there you go. His recommendation. His recommendation is that you award this bid to Crescent Excavation in the amount of $93,632. And that's compared to the engineer's estimate of approximately $104,000, so it is in line with that estimate.
So moved.
Second.
We have a second, so moved in a second. Is there discussion?
I do have one question. Is there concern about, of course, the engineer's estimate is 103, but is there concern about the disparity?
Kevin didn't express concern. I'm comfortable. I did ask him, are you comfortable with the bid? And he said yes, and we've used this company a couple of times
I did
before.
notice that, yeah.
Yeah. So no, he's not concerned about it.
Okay.
I just assume it means these other two companies have plenty of work, and so they weren't that hungry.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay. Now, and I'm one of these that changed the agenda around because there's some things that I want in a different spot, and I'm not even going with my changed agenda. Now it's your turn, Lisa.
Okay, thank you. The next agenda item is the solid waste, green waste, and recycling collection agreement between Centerville City and Ace Disposal. Centerville is currently under contract with Ace Disposal to do all of our collection services. We've been with them for over 10 years and felt that it was responsible to go out to bid again to make sure that we're getting the market rate for that collection service. So we did go out to bid and received 3 bids that were very close. in cost, but it was determined that ACE was the most responsive bidder. And on March 21st, the council approved the award of that bid to ACE. And so we're just coming back tonight because that bid award was subject to ACE entering into another contract with us for the 5-year term of this collection service with some extensions. So I've prepared a collection services agreement with ACE, and I used the 2010 agreement that we had with them, but went through that and tried to update it with, I compared it with what we had done in the bid and made sure that we were, you know, apples to apples, and updated a few things based upon our ordinances. But and then we sat down with ACE and worked through those provisions, and I think the agreement that's in your packet is acceptable to both parties, so staff is recommending approval of this contract, which would be with ACE Disposal for 5 years with, I believe, 1 or 2 2-year extensions. And ACE representatives are here if you'd like to also hear from them on this contract renewal.
I do have one item of curiosity with the
Yeah,
contract.
I saw you smiling, so.
I just want to know where the term came in for not picking up things that are on fire. Was that something we came up with, or ACE? Because there's got to be a story behind that one.
As I said, I used the 2010 contract, so yeah, sometimes maybe people light things on fire, so it's in there.
Okay.
We like to cover all our bases, but I'm really glad you read the contract.
I've got a couple of items.
Great. And if you can just give me the page, then I can switch to that quickly.
Page 3, non-processable waste, any load, the majority of which consists of combustible material. That
Yes.
paper?
So these terms are in our current ordinance. So yes, again, I think these are things that we would be worried that are going into the burn plant. So we've used a lot of their definitions and other definitions, so.
But the burn plant is no longer, right?
Right, but this is still in our ordinance. So we could look, we found a couple other ordinance amendments that we may want to make. And with that, we could certainly make some changes, but I'm hesitant to change the terms in the contract.
It's not that I have a problem with, I'm more curious. The next item, two lines down, any material that when incinerated clearly conducts electricity?
Right, so we don't want those again, I think that's probably because of the burn plant.
What? Well, I guess I'm curious what item would.
Metal items, or perhaps batteries, or other items, electronics. And maybe Ace can help me with some of these, but.
Yeah, I kind of thought maybe one of them would respond.
Ace, do you want to come up
He would come
to
up.
the microphone, what, the representative?
I'm as interested to know as well.
Hi, Dawn Beagley with Ace Disposal. What it would be is batteries, and it did come from the burn plant, like she is saying in that. But we have had, like batteries or something that's put into, the, like when we're compacting the trash, and it will start a fire. And when we do have a fire in the back of the truck, we have to dump it as soon as possible. And we love our LDS churches because we use their parking lots a lot if we ever have those problems.
And does that happen once
Since
a year,
I've worked
or?
for Ace twice. One in
Yeah.
Twilla and one in West Jordan, not in
And how long have
Centerville.
you worked for Ace?
I'm going to 18 years.
Okay.
I love talking trash.
So it's rare. So it's rare. On page 9, I've lived here for 28 years, and I do not recall any kind of a schedule change. But this schedule change notice, in my mind, is not adequate. Now, maybe since we never have a schedule change, you don't worry about it. But 3/4 of the street, of my street, no longer takes the newspaper. So notice in the newspaper is worthless. And at least 2 days, but not more than 7, I would think we'd want more notice than that.
So section 22 says that the contractor shall notify each and every residential unit in the city of changes in the collection schedule by publishing the schedule in the newspaper at least 2 days prior, but no more than 7 days. Okay, then we've got the holiday. In the event the schedule change alters the day of pickup service, the contractor shall notify customers affected by such change by written notice left at the residence at least 2 weeks prior. So if it's one of those ones where you have to put your can out on a different day, we will give you hand-delivered or mailed notice to the residents. But if it's just on a non-holiday sort of contractor change that we talk about in section 20, then yeah, it's that newspaper notice. And I agree, if there's other ways that you think, I'm all about.
I don't even know that I know. I'm just saying.
I agree that the newspaper is not the way to notify people.
The best notice is that when everybody else's can is out on the street, guess what? There's something's going on. It's changed.
Yeah, but in thinking about it myself, I mean, really, yeah, personally, if they're going to change when I need to put my can out, they really need to put something in my mailbox or on my can. But again, for minor, like once a year kind of changes where they just couldn't get out here or something like that, I think in the standpoint of contract negotiation, it's not cost effective to have to put a mailer on every single thing for that one time. So that's what this clause was trying to address, was balancing major changes with once a year, not so major changes. But, again, I don't think the city website is appropriate either, because nobody's going to know to go to the website.
I don't have an answer. I'm just raising the question.
Yeah, and it's a good question. But just so you know, if you read the last sentence of that one, if we are changing the day that you have to put your can out, which I consider a major change, then they have to give at least 2 weeks written notice at the residence.
So if I can comment on it, what it is like, okay, so if we're going to be, like our routes have got so big, so on, let's say Wednesday, we just can't get, because you guys have so much growth here, we'd probably want to push something to Thursday. So that's what that would be, is if part of the Wednesday route we'd change to Thursday, we would go to all those residents with a letter that we, of course, have it okayed with you guys, and say, hey, could we change this route to Thursday because Wednesday's too big? We would notify every single resident ourselves personally with your guys' okay. Another situation where this has happened is if you guys have major road construction on one of your main streets with the residents and stuff. This happened actually in West Jordan on 70th South. So what we had to do is because you just couldn't stop a garbage truck on 70th and do all 3 services we did there. So we had to meet up with the construction, meet up with the city, and what we had to do is we had to notify every single resident on there, and plus the residents that we had 3 cul-de-sacs that we had to go into. And what we had to do is we sent 1 truck to pick up their trash, recycling, and green waste for 2 months. But that was all agreed upon with the city and the contractors, because it was just 70th is such a main thoroughfare for West Jordan City that they had to make that decision, because those trucks stopping and with everybody trying to get through there. But we would notify, anything like that. So that's kind of what that's talking about.
So what are the situations where the first sentence applies, where it just says if there's a change in collection schedule, we'll just put it in the newspaper? So what are those kinds of situations?
So just on both of those hypotheticals, the first one where they want to change it from Wednesday to Thursday, you have to look at this section 22 along with section 20, which talks about collection services. But it does say in section 20 that permanent or substantial changes to the collection service must be approved by the city council as an amendment to this agreement. So there will be notice if they want to change Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they need to come back to the city council, and it's an amendment, which also builds into the system public notice to people that we are changing the circumstances. Now, in hypothetical B, where it was just 2 months, I guess it's sort of in between here whether you consider that, what's the term? A major change or substantial change, then they're going to notify those, and I would think on that one they probably notify those individuals. directly as well.
Yes.
But if you have
We
a
would-
better idea, I'm certainly open to it.
But so what would be the cause that would, for it to be put in the newspaper?
Probably hypothetical B, like a,
In other words, the construction that took place on Chase Lane 2 years ago would have been.
right,
a
yeah, maybe we have a
major
major, yes,
Major interruption
something
because
like
the
that.
street was torn out from Main Street to 4th East.
Mhm.
And you had to, I mean, you couldn't, you had a 6 or 8 inch drop to get into that area.
And what we've done too with the drops, because we actually had Twilla Main Street revamped and everything of that for 2016. And so what we, on that, we're really good about getting together with the cities and the construction. And so what we do on that, the construction workers are to, like yours are drop off like that, they have to, on their garbage day, grab the residents' garbage cans and take it to where it's safe for us to dump them, even if they have to take it to the other side of the road and we'll dump it. But it's the construction, a lot of times it's this construction people's to do that. But with the, what I told you about West Jordan is because we have the 3 services there and we just could not have 3 cans going down 70th to stop all that traffic. But we do really work really closely with any of the construction workers out there on the streets because it's very important for those streets to be finished and done in the summertime. And your trash and recycling and green waste to be picked up also.
So that then brings up the next question I had, section 27, commingling. If there's commingling, whose problem is that, ours or yours?
well, this section is just, sorry, since you don't
No.
have it in front of you, it says contractors shall not commingle any business, commercial, industrial, or institutional solid waste, green waste, recyclable with that collected from residential users, municipal buildings, or city parks. No, nor commingle any solid waste, et cetera, collected from outside the city. What this is talking about, it's not talking about commingling within the trash can, but that ACE is not allowed to commingle any of our trash with any Bountiful trash or Farmington trash, because when it goes to the facility, we pay those fees. So they can't use any other, and then we're also saying they can't commingle within their trucks. So when we say it's going to be, you know, they're going to collect the recycling separate from the green waste. They're not going to commingle it within their truck. And again, that's to protect our fees because they pay the recycling fees. We pay the disposal facility
Yeah, I
fees.
understand, but from some conversations that I've had with some people, I'm given to understand, but especially at the end of the day or at the end of a route, when you have partial trucks, that there's a lot of commingling that goes on.
The only time there would ever be any commingling if somebody put their trash out late or it was missed and the recycling truck's already gone to the recycling facility so we're not going to send the recycling truck out only just to get 1 or 2 cans of the recycling. So it's at the end of the day what we'll do is we'll send a trash truck out to pick up the green waste, recycling, and the trash, and so there's only 1 truck going back to that resident after they've already done the whole route. You know, it's just not feasible to really send, you know, the recycle truck back.
That makes sense.
Okay,
And actually,
so that's-
sorry, reading this, it's actually saying they can't commingle business, commercial, and institutional with waste collected from what's under this contract. Does that make sense? So actually, that's what this clause is, the first sentence of section 27 is addressing, that they can't commingle, because if they get it, we would allow them, if they want to get a contract and collect some commercial waste or some waste from our private streets that we do not pay for, what we're saying is they can't use those trucks to do their private contracts and use the same trucks to pick up our waste.
So the mixing then, it would be our problem.
I'd have to see if there's a different provision that covers that, but Yeah, offhand, I don't know. if
But
we-
as a, Ace Disposal, we've been in business for 38 years, and the city contracts and the commercial contracts are very important to us, so we're not going to be mixing any of these items and that. And I mean, and it's very important because we actually send reports of the trash that we pick up through your city every month. We send reports of all the recycling and all the green waste weights of everything. So we have, it's all legit of what we are picking up, because we're not going to go and pick up Bountiful's and mix it with your guys' trash, because Bountiful wants their own numbers and West Bountiful wants their own numbers. So, we're not going to do that. And I believe that's the reason we've been in business for so long also, is because, we do what we're supposed to do with the contracts. That's why the contracts are so important to us and you guys.
So the question I have for the council, Bill, have you got your clarification? Do we need more clarification?
I have one last question. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I just, if we need to adjust the contract, let's let's get our clarification, so.
When there is a problem, is there a requirement, if the driver starts tipping too soon and trash misses the truck, is the driver required to pick that up?
Yes. Yes. And
is that in here someplace? I looked for it and couldn't find it.
no, it's always just been ACE's rules. We just decided to do this years ago, and that since I've been involved with the cities. I mean, if we knock over a can or we see trash, fly out, that's why with the recycling, we don't really want the shredded recycling, because that, if the bag rips or something, then it's going to fly out within your city. So that's why it's very important, to make sure that the lid is closed on all of your cans, for the trucks are designed for, if the lids are all closed on your cans, that all of the trash will go completely into the can, and then we'll be able to put it down, and there should be no trash out. That's why we really want the cans lids closed when we're dumping the cans. And so we do notify residents also with tags and that if they're contaminated on their recycling or they're overloaded, and we actually will send pictures off to the city, to Jacob right now, and any concerns, we actually tag the resident, let them know, and that. So it's really, I mean, and even if a driver even knocks a can over, he will pick it up. And that if the wind blows it over after he's done it, then does not see that. Sometimes on unlevel grounds and that, but they are required to get out of their trucks and pick it up and everything in that. So I mean, it's really important for us to do a great job for the city.
I'm not trying to intimate that you haven't. I was just asking.
Okay, good.
I would like to comment and say that you have done a great job for our city. I've been very impressed with the customer service of the drivers and that kind of responsiveness. And then at one point I had a switch-in driver, and the new driver wasn't as responsive as my old driver. And so I called, and that got taken care of through ACE, and I saw a big improvement after that. So
yes.
So good job. The one thing that I would say is I would take this opportunity for us to mention that it's probably time for some more education about recyclables, especially where the market is so much tighter. So last time you guys were here, we talked about what's allowed, what's not, and I think that that's tightened up. We talked about that food contamination last time was a little looser than it is now. And so whether ACE wants to take the lead on that, or if we just need to ask our city newsletter people to be sure to, this next little while, I think we should have a regular feature on that, because that education is so important.
Okay, we actually, just this year, we hired a sustainability gal. Her name is Rebecca, and that's her main job is to educate and to just make sure all of the recycling markets, and just make sure that, we're doing everything correct. She come out with a nice letter of everything that it's accepted in the recycling stream, and it shows pictures of items instead of the numbers, like on plastics, like 1 through 2, 1 through 7 and that, but it shows mainly the pictures. And the reason we had to go this way is because the recyclers here, they don't want, like their styrofoam, they don't want, the pizza boxes anymore. They don't want anything bagged. They don't want, any of the grocery bags.
Right.
And that. So yes, we actually have that. I will send that to Jacob, and we can share it with you guys, and we can help do some education. Do you guys do the cart days here? I mean, if you would like, we could even actually be at the event and have maybe even one of our big red shiny trucks out there.
Yeah.
And we can do some education about being safe around the trucks and to, you know, give flyers out and talk about recycling to all of the residents and stuff.
You should
It's a
enter
great,
our parade.
it's a great program we do, you know, with some of the other cities and that, but, and the thing is, what the big red trucks being at the site instead of just having a booth, that drags the kids because they want to see it, and then drags the parents along, for then everybody will learn about the recycling. So we can do that if you guys would like that.
I think that'd be awesome if we could do it at our 4th of July celebration.
Okay.
We don't have room for your truck where we put our booths. It's really crowded. But
What?
maybe the truck could enter the parade and you could pass out flyers.
Maybe,
We'll have to talk to you
Maybe
about
we could
the
use the truck
options.
for a dunking tank.
We'll make sure it's clean.
That'd be great if you'd get that information to us, like you just said you have, and Councilwoman Fillmore requested we could get it in our newsletter, on our website, whatever. And
I
as
think
far,
it's a good idea.
yeah, and it sounds like we're all in favor of having your truck come out sometime. It's, I guess, finding a good time that we think that we should do it, right? So,
I also want to put in that I've been very impressed with your service, and I've seen your driver many a times get out and pick up garbage that I didn't think was his responsibility. And he always waits for me in my nightgown when I'm trying to get mine out, so. Just saying.
Okay, I have to tell you a story then, because one thing is, you guys have some terrific wins here.
Yes, we do.
And so Jenny, she was the driver out here, and we had another gentleman out here driving. The wind was blowing so bad, so your guys' staff at Public Works could see that Jenny was getting out of her truck, picking up the can, hurrying up, trying to dump it and everything. So the city staff actually went in front of both of our trucks, stood up all of the cans while she went through your city and dumped them. So I actually did a special lunch for all of the Public Works
That's great.
that year, and that, because it's like, how else can I thank them for doing this for us? I mean, it's cleaning up the city and just really helped us out, and of course kept the city clean. So just really want to appreciate you guys as Public Works and everybody that ACE works with here at City Hall. Everybody is just awesome to work with. I mean, if anybody ever has a problem, they call me, and I am, and Mercedes is actually, you know, we're the ones that if you have a big problem, you come to us, and we will actually go out to the residents and figure out that
clause.
I'll make a motion that we approve the solid waste, green waste, and recycling collection agreement between the city and Ace Disposal.
second.
we have a motion and a second. Let's just do all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Sounds like it's unanimous, so thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for all the hard
Appreciate
work.
it.
Thanks,
both
Don.
from you and with our city attorney. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Lisa.
So Lisa, we consider that a roll call vote, right?
Yeah,
You want me to roll call it?
yeah, it's a substantial sum of money.
Okay,
for
let's roll
5
call
years.
it. Let's count, starting with Councilwoman Ivy.
Aye.
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 That sounds like it passes.
Thank you.
5-0.
Still unanimous, Lisa.
I was gonna roll call it, but, so I apologize.
It just wasn't a 5-part harmony doing it that way.
Yeah.
It almost was.
I couldn't hear that soft whisper, so I thought it was 5-0. Okay, so next thing on our agenda is we want to get Marcus up here. We have the financial report for 9 months, and also, so Marcus, if you could well, let's do that first, then we'll go to the next item, so.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
I have to apologize to Marcus, though, because I put him at this point on the agenda with the confidence that he'd be done by 7:30 and on the road to St. George, the same place Jake is headed, so.
No, that's okay.
Sorry, Marcus.
No, we're okay. I like to drive at night. So. All right, so if we go to the cash position, I mean, this is the end of March 31st. Overall I mean, we've got 12 months of history here now. The majority of the increase went up about 1.5 million or so, and the majority of that is due to the RDA property tax money coming in. The PTIF rate is up over 2% for the first time in a long time, so that's good to see as well. Move on to the next page, and we can see the. Oh, sorry. Yep. Questions on that first page?
Help me again, and I should know this, I think, but I can't figure it out.
Okay.
Why have we got $1 million more year over year? The RDA money shouldn't make that difference. We were 324 a year ago. We're $1.3 million now. What's the $1 million?
Wait, you mean in the RDA fund? What?
No, in the general.
In the general fund overall, we're at 3 million last year.
I would guess it's the increase in the transportation funds, and then we've been like holding on to those and waiting for big projects? Or?
No, we're talking about the general fund, the first column. Part of it.
Oh, general.
Part of it, Bill, is that we have 400,000 more in property tax, actually 500,000 more, because we're getting about 100,000 more than we had budgeted. So $500,000 of that increase is due to the property tax increase.
Okay.
Or additional property tax, I should say, most of it from the increase, some of it from whatever. And the other might be attributable to maybe last year we had some major equipment expenditures or something that hit right there in April. I don't know. I can't answer your question right now other than the property tax is part of that answer.
Right, and it could also be, and I'm not sure right out without looking, but I mean, we could have more building permit, or what are the bond deposits that are in there? There's about 800,000.
Oh, that could be it too.
As of
Yeah,
right now that
it
we're
could be
holding.
cash that is not really ours but it's assigned to the general fund.
Okay.
Yeah, that's probably it, Marcus, now that you mention that.
Well,
And I think part of it, quite frankly, too, if I may take this liberty to say, is that we are in a better position financially in terms of the estimating the revenues and managing the expenditures. I think we have probably a couple of 100,000 gain there compared to last year.
Okay.
All right. Page 2, we can see the restrictions on the cash that, I mean, there's about 771,000 that's just being held for those bonds and deposits. But good thing is I mean, in every fund, we have the cash to cover all the restrictions. Also notice in the general fund, we set up that due from the RDA fund, which we were directed to do that from the work session in the RDA meeting. The RAP tax fund has loaned the park impact fee money for that park project, but that has been reduced as well because we did transfer 100,000 as directed in that RDA meeting as well. So that due to, due from is a little bit less than it was last month. Just a little bit remaining of the due to, due from in the sanitation and drainage utility fund, but I think that'll be paid off in next month or so. But any questions about the restrictions on the cash?
No. Can we get the typo corrected on the Whitaker Trust Fund?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'll get that corrected.
It's minor, but.
No, thanks. And then if we go to the summary, there's one other correction I need to correct on here for next month, but the monthly actual is March actual, not February actual. Those are the March numbers. It's just the heading on that didn't get transferred over correctly, but the numbers are okay. So if we look at the summary, the year is 75% over 9 months. We look at the taxes. We're approximately 100,000 over what the estimate will be if you take the 3 different categories.
At least that's our
That's
projection. That's our
projections
projection
are.
for the end of the fiscal year. I think it
Right.
was 78,000 the other day, Marcus, when we totaled those 3.
That's true, because we haven't collected all the motor vehicle, but by the end of the year, and I think we talked about that too in the RDA work session, where we're a little bit under on the RDA side, but we're seeing that as an increase on the residential side.
Bill, that was you and Jake that mentioned that in the RDA meeting, and I didn't fully appreciate it at the time, but when I was talking about the shifting of the valuation, relatively speaking, between the commercial and the residential area, that hurt our RDA commercial areas. but it seems to have benefited our residential areas, so those dollars are coming to the city rather than to the RDA. Some of those dollars that we lost in the RDA, not all of them, or not most of them, but some of them, because of the city's tax levy now. And more of those dollars are coming to the city of Centerville rather than the redevelopment agency.
Okay.
And so yeah, property tax, sales tax is a little bit ahead of schedule at 77%. Franchise taxes are doing well, except a little behind on the gas. Licenses and permits have picked up over the year. We're a little higher than we started out the year, so things are looking okay there. But overall, I mean, revenue, we're at 81%, ahead of that 75%. So we're looking good on the revenue side.
Most of that, though, is due to the property tax that was sent that hasn't been spent yet over the next 3 months.
Okay. On the expenditure side, overall, we're just under 70%. I mean, every department looks okay. There's a few that are slightly over the 75%, but they're such small dollar amounts. I mean, the youth council, engineering, parks and recreation facility are over that 75, but the dollar amount's so minimal. It seems like every department is doing pretty good with their budget. But anything we want to look into more on the expenditure side of the general fund? Okay, we'll move on to the RDA fund, and we'll see the revenue, 86%. You can see we're the $135,000 short on the property tax. The expense side, the largest portion for the monthly total was that additional $100,000 transfer. The $17,000 is a monthly budgeted transfer that's always made, but then that $100,000 that was talked about in the RDA meeting was also made. Any questions about the RDA fund as you look at that? Okay, the recreation, baseball revenue, it makes up the majority of that. Not a whole lot on the expenditure side. Move on to the RAP tax fund. We're at 77%, so that appears that that's coming in just as planned and budgeted. Not a whole lot of expenditures this month. Not a whole lot in the cemetery fund either. Move on to the next page. The debt service fund. There's the 2009 bond payment will be made in April. So we'll see activity in April. It's due May 1st, but that'll be out in April. Then we go into the capital project, the park fund. The revenues, that $100,000 that came in that we've kind of already talked about, and the expenditures are related to that community park project. Transportation fund. The Prop 1 money, Class C money, it's all coming in just as budgeted at 78 and 77%. Then there's the transfers, so the revenues seem good. On the expenditure side, not a whole lot this month. I mean, the majority of the expenses are on the frontage bike lane project, the overlay, and then the slurry seal projects are what the majority of those expenses are.
Well, let me clarify, Marcus, on the annual project line under expenditures, you see year-to-date, the $554,000. Most of that was completing the contracts from last year that carried over into this fiscal year.
That was the 2017 slurry seal.
Right,
Yeah.
right, slurry seal and the paving contracts.
Okay.
We will bring to you in May a recommendation for substantial work. I think we'll have between the two contracts this year well over $1 million that will be recommended to you in May.
Okay. And the Utopia Fund, I mean, it just as planned, the money comes transferred in and then paid out for the pledge payments. We go on to the next page to the enterprise funds. The operating revenue is 79%, so it's pretty much with budget. Operating expenses at 72%. Nothing too out of the ordinary in the water fund. Sanitation fund is also right with budget at 74% on the revenue and 73% on the expenditure. And the drainage fund is at 76% on the revenue. And so things, I mean, they're pretty consistent. Nothing really out of the ordinary on any of those. Yeah.
Could you explain how on charges for services, 529% isn't out of the ordinary?
On which fund?
Water
Charges
fund.
for services in the water fund?
Oh, well, charges for services, they add that, I mean, that's the operating revenue is kind of what I was looking at, the 71, but there's been water line construction, with the.
This is on the revenues side, on the water fund?
This is
Very top line of page 6.
This is developer money that is collected for water lines for new development. So
Right, so we
not really
collect and
ours.
then we pay out, but we
Right.
don't budget those
we
amounts.
don't know how to predict
Right.
that number.
Okay, that
Yeah.
explains it. Thank you.
Right, and same with the impact fees. So the normal operating revenue, the one on 4 is what I was talking about, but yeah, it's, you know, you don't know exactly how the development's gonna happen, and the impact fees, we're ahead of schedule on that as well.
If you look down under expenditures, you'll see subdivision water line projects, 100,000, 633 year to date. There's other expenditures to be incurred out of that money, that revenue up above that you were just referring to.
Mhm. So down below, you just don't even have budgeted amounts, but up above, we
Yeah.
have put a budget amount. And so it's just impossible to predict.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah. And then the telecom fund, I mean, the revenue came in, the expense didn't hit this month due to timing of the payable, so there'll be 2 in April. And on the last fund, the Whitaker Fund, I mean, there were transfers in, a little bit of interest, and then about $2,800 of expenditures for the month of March. But any questions about the summary? You want to look into detail of any of the accounts?
I think they don't want to make you wait any longer to get on the road.
No.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marcus. Do you have, I noticed the next portion is the balance sheet. Is there any particular highlights you want to bring out there, or questions from council members, or?
And there's a balance sheet for each fund.
I know.
As you go
Yeah.
through the
Yes.
document.
Right, and we summarize the cash in those beginning pages. The others are related to accounts receivable. I mean, some of them are just, there's an asset and a liability that offset each other just for reporting purposes that really don't affect the budget. But scan through the I mean, we go through the assets and liabilities and true some up. We're always truing up the prepaid expenses to make sure we expense 1/12 each month. We're making sure the accounts receivables are reasonable. We true up the accrued liability, mostly the accrued payroll accounts. Then there's the cash bonds, those are what the restricted cash portions are. We review those with Lisa to make sure they're okay. I mean, there's the court money that we review with the court people. And so we go through the balance sheet because to make sure the balance sheet is right, you got to make sure the balance sheet is correct because the entries are typically to the income statement. And so we do go through all the balance sheets and make sure they're correct for the end of each month to make sure we have the right revenues and expenses in each of the funds. The general fund, I mean, has the majority of the balance sheet items, and then the enterprise funds, you know, there's the fixed assets, there's debt in the enterprise funds. But any specific balance sheet questions that we want to look at, but there's
Any highlights, revenues, and expenditures in any of the funds you wanted to bring out to us, or any questions from council members?
I mean, yeah, really the enterprise funds are, the operating side of things look pretty much right on target. The expenditures are under. I mean, the funds that have the most cash are related to the sewer fund, the transportation fund, and the general fund.
You said sewer, you meant?
Yeah.
You didn't mean sewer.
The drainage.
Okay,
The drainage
okay,
or sewer.
okay.
And I know there's, future projects for those funds that money's kind of planned for. There's a lot of road projects, a lot of drainage projects that are there, and then the general fund cash is that restricted cash that we're holding, trying to build that up to build up the fund balance. But overall, things look good. I think we're heading in the right direction. The fund balances are, increasing. We're tracking things well, I think so. We know the cash and the restricted cash, and so I think things are going in the right direction.
Thanks, Marcus. Questions? Hey, let's move then to item number 6, Marcus, while we still have you. And
yeah.
I had moved this off the summary action calendar because obviously this is important to my heart, being a financial guy. But and will you just quickly describe for us the proposal for audit services?
Yeah. So I've talked to Steve, and we're recommending that we use Hinton Burdick again to do the audit for the fiscal 18 year. I've talked to Hinton Burdick, and they're saying that they could do it for $18,900, which is $900 higher than last year. The year before we paid $18,000, so 2 years of $18,000, and before that it was in the $20,000, $21,000 range. So that's what they're asking for, the $18,900. We're recommending to go with that. For last year I had to talk them into going to the $18,000. They thought the size of the city and the number of funds were more around 20 to 22,000, but they did the 18. Now they're asking for 18.9. And we're recommending to do that. It's so much easier working with an audit firm the second year compared to the first year, just because they're familiar with what's going on. We're familiar with them. So that's kind of our recommendation.
Any questions for him before we get a motion for the proposal for audit services?
Motion to approve audit services as defined in item 6.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, starting with Councilman Meekum.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Marcus, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Drive safe.
All right, thanks.
And
Watch out for
go
those deer
safe.
on the road.
Yeah.
And good luck in your presentation
All
tomorrow
right.
too. I hear you're the main presenter, are you?
Yeah, Thursday morning. So.
Okay, so
right.
try and get a couple hours of sleep at least.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Let's go to item 7 on our agenda. And this is proposed process to create a management plan for city's Foothills property, and we have our city planner, Corey Snyder, to address that.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just as a disclaimer here, I'm trying to facilitate. I don't have a specific agenda. There's a lot of interest, good and bad, about the property of the city up there. You've heard proposals, and I'm just, at this point in time, after our field trip, I kind of verbally volunteered I would help out. Why the motivation? We do have a Foothills management plan. Our Foothills management plan does discuss inside and outside the city in the foothills, and there is a sense of priority towards recreation uses in that Foothills management plan. And so having the background of helping with the formulation of that plan, I thought I might at least wrap our minds around the city's property up there. The intent is not to say this is the route. The intent is to try to get your arms around the tree, the redwood tree, and see if we can come up with something about the property. I think it's two-part. I've split it in my vision of two parts. The first one is we have an asset liability, for lack of better terms, with the property in the city. We've gone up there, we've seen some of the problems that are happening there. We have numerous uses that are occurring into that area. So simply wrapping our vision around the property from a management perspective, I think, is the first step. I don't think we can jump to a use plan per se without understanding where we're at, what's happening. And so I've selected to divide it out, that this first part is trying to tackle the matter, and then we could move into master planning if that's a step that seems to be appropriate. So the first section I've put up in kind of a easy illustration flow chart is just assessments. You've already having ESI Engineering, Kevin Campbell, performing some of the studies of the area for drainage and conditions. I think that's a good move in understanding what we're dealing with in the property and its conditions. Having seen many conversations, though, in and outside the field trip, I am, from my perspective, a little concerned that unless we have a better management plan, the direction that we'd go to solve the problems may be misplaced, particularly as you look at the opportunity for drainage and erosion control. It could weigh heavy on the infrastructure side rather than using the assets that are available on the property. And so you could be running down $500,000 for drainage when that may be attenuated with looking at a better management plan for the property than the expenditure of that infrastructure. So I think having that balance and assessment is important in using Kevin's work with the engineering. The other thing I thought about is the users. We intuitively somewhat know the users. People are walking up there, biking up there. We have the ATVs up there on the field trip, a lot of ATVs up there. The second field trip, more ATVs. My third field trip, more, and my fourth, about the same as the third. So the spring is obviously heavy use with the ATV users, but a lot of walkers too. A lot of people are walking in different areas of the property. So I think it would be important to understand. I dream just in brainstorming, whether it's the youth council, a Boy Scout project, some of the park staff, if we have some temporary help, finding a system where we can do kind of a census, just finding out who's there, how often they come, they belong at any clubs, is it residents, is it outsiders? I mean, I don't know what the results would be, but I think it would be important to try to find out and kind of get an idea of what's happening and how often, so kind of a use census up there. And then the other part, I think, is there multiple stakeholders here. The Dual Creek property is being used to access the upper foothills. There's the Pistol Club. There's no range there, but there's actually an ownership of a Pistol Club for the property in addition to our lease with the gun club above. We have easements of the Weber Basin Canal traversing through the property. So what's recorded on the properties, who's using it, is there agreements, is there not agreements, are there easements, are there limitations to those easements? I think we need to gain a better understanding of an assessment of what's in place, and as we maybe begin to think about planning in the future. As we kind of get that data and understanding and assemble it together, I think it would be good to maybe consider an ad hoc committee. We could decide how that is. Usually, from the planning perspective, we're using a city council member, planning commissioner, a trails committee, a user, the property owners below, some committee. 8 to 10 is about the size of a good ad hoc committee. If you start getting to 20, it gets really difficult to have the conversation with the group and make some assessment. But I think we could use an ad hoc committee to begin exploring. The purpose of that is representation, different people's perspectives, the ideas. As problem solving and thinking happens, having that committee assess it is better than just having a single staff person trying to figure out what's happening out there. And I think the purpose of that committee, if we use one, is to wrap our arms around what's happening with the property, the sustainability, the erosion, and kind of make that assessment of what kind of policies from a management perspective, like erosion control. You know, I can dream up 3 or 4 different erosion control opportunities, but the assessment of whether that's the best one, I think we want to run by those who could look at it, so we can figure out the sustainability. And then the concepts from there is we have access and management control, and what are the ideas to explore the possibilities of that. And I think the ultimate thing is this risk management assessment. I perceived from the field trip that there was a gratefulness to the Bike and Trails Committee for bringing this back to our minds and attention. I don't think anybody is not understanding what has been going on up there. I think it's just become to the forefront. And so the question is how long can the existing way of doing things with the property sustain itself in a risk management situation? And what does it mean? We have a lot of acreage up there. Users are up there. We've been lucky that there's been some serious accidents, I've been told, of the past, but lucky that hasn't been turned into something in a larger and broader sense. And so I think we need to think about that as the property owner and the responsibility of us as public owning that piece of land to look at that assessment and come up with those short-term goals and ideas that can be explored. They not be the answers, but they can at least be explored, so we can talk about if funding has to occur just in the managing of the property, what would be the best routes to be considered in any type of funding and expenditure, which is very much your interest, because everybody wants your deep pockets, and your deep pockets are not as deep as everybody's wants. So we have to figure that out. And then probably some future goals, ideas of we know that the Trails Committee has a bike, so we know that that's somewhat of a future goal, and coming to an understanding of what that goal is. I know in discussions with Randy, he and I have very different perspectives originally of what that bike course was going to be like. And when I showed him the video of what I thought it was going to be like, he was shocked. And Randy had been up there walking on the property and talking to them several times. And so he went on another field trip, and through his statement, he said, "Corey, you're right, it wasn't what I thought." So I think we need to have a greater understanding of what it means and what's going on, so that there's a common understanding of what's happening. And so I think we need to have that. And then there's obviously some type of phasing. There's no way to solve all of this problem all at once. So we need to discuss what would that phasing kind of look like. And as we've kind of get this management idea going, then we can begin to have the dialogue about the property itself and the current conditions as potential future opportunities. And then maybe the second phase is to begin whether we want to go the aggressive route with a master plan for the property. I certainly can dream big, so if you turn me loose to dream big, I'll help you dream big. If the answer from the council is we want to narrow it to this, then I would facilitate whatever you need to narrow it to that level.
I'll start out with a comment. I think this looks like a really good plan, and I would agree with all the steps you've put in. The one thing that I would say is I'd like to tighten the time frame a little bit, and one area that I see that could work well is on the ad hoc committee. I know that I've served on these kinds of committees before, and I know that you can ask someone, will you serve on a committee? Well, we're just going to meet once a month. It's not a big deal. Or you can just say, we really need your voice. Does this night work for you? We're going to meet for the next 4 weeks in a row on this night. And condense that to a month rather than 3. And if it doesn't work for the first person you ask, then you go to someone else to fill that spot and that role there. So I think that couple months on the tail end of the timeline would really make a really big difference.
I agree with the premise. The issue is your resources. Your planning commission has some extensive goals that they want to discuss with you, and they don't want to wait until this is completed for that goal. So the resources of staff and what is going to be balanced is where I'm trying to be reasonable, but I don't see a problem that if you want to look at resources, including temporary hire or some part-time work or consultants or whatever, that you want to charrette, for lack of better terms, and do a hefty 4-week involvement. I don't want to discourage you from that, but I do see that if I'm picked to manage the process and I've got this planning commission and the regular commission businesses, I think 4 weeks would be difficult for me to pull off for you as an individual. So you would need other resources to help out with that.
Other questions, comments?
So when I was up there, I had to kind of be held back so that I didn't jump out of Randy's truck and go down and have a few words with a couple of those guys that were clearly out of bounds of where they were supposed to be riding. I appreciate the structure that you've put into this, but I wonder if we could, right at the beginning, have a little blitz of ticketing. And I know we're short on staff for doing that, police officers and others, but I think we've got a little window right here before the school year ends where if we just went up there, it would be a massive effort, and hit several nights in a row or a couple weekends in a row and ticketed, that word would get out and people would say, oh, they're serious about you have to ride where you're supposed to. And that could cut down on, it would skew the data a little, but at the same time, I think it would improve our.
Yeah, I think if you want to, I would call that a rapid response. I think that's something that conversation with Steve and if the council directs to what would that look like and be. I wasn't focusing on the access and control in the immediate. I was looking at the long range. But yeah,
right.
And I've talked to Steve about some early ideas. I've thought of some more to bring some control for the erosion. I think that is an immediate rapid response issue. How immediate is a definitive versus the immediate response of the users and the violation of that. I think those are two different time frames.
Did you and Bruce talk? Bruce, did you share your thoughts with Corey about what could be done up there right of way in the way of identifying the boundary?
No,
I realize Stephanie's talking about enforcement, but we also would need to. Do you want to come up to that mic over there, Bruce? So I've heard several of you express concern about trying to do something right away to contain or control somewhat the abuse that is occurring above that bowl area, particularly on the up slope of the bowl area. And Corey had some ideas, Bruce had some ideas in terms of fencing or in lieu of fencing. So why don't you share those thoughts?
Just for the immediate future, this next week or so, we've ordered just more of the fiberglass carcinite signs that the police have a big long sticker that they put on it that says no motorized vehicles, and that we would be able to kind of drive those in like fence post fashion along the areas where the abuse is taking place, and with the help of either a volunteer or even just some employees taking some time to go get those put in right away. So it's clearly visible that, hey, there's a line along here that we shouldn't be passing. It doesn't stop them from passing, it just makes them aware that they are passing a line.
Does our language include the dollar amount of the fine, just rather than don't do it, it's $2.99 or $4.99 or whatever the number is?
I
find that helps with enforcement when they know exactly how much it costs.
Yeah, I don't know exactly, other than no motorized vehicles, I don't know what exactly the stickers say. The chief said he's already got them printed up. Okay. And we've been using them. They're something we use every year. We put a few more out in places to try to deter use. So that's something we can do right away. And then we talked about possibly putting in a gate as you come along the front of the dike. There's a roadway right there that it would be a place where, other than going up over the dike through the boulders, it would be a place where you could control and put a gate in the cost of the gate and some fencing. But beyond that, I think you're talking about fencing and some other expenses and things. One option that we became aware of this just recently is there's a federal grant which comes with strings, but there's a federal grant specifically for trails and for ATV areas and things, and putting up fencing and staging area, improving a parking lot staging area are acceptable uses of this kind of a grant.
Yeah, I happened to be at the planning conference in St. George, and there was actually a session on that, so I went to that session.
Nicely done.
So, well, this would be a very, very possible source of revenue to at least get a gate in place and some control infrastructure in place to kind of start. Another idea we had was maybe an inner city loan where maybe the general fund loans the money to build the gate and fencing that then is paid back through user fees, that in order to go through the gate or have a key to the gate or something, that they pay a user fee of some kind, or get a Centerville license or something of some kind to use the area. That could then pay back over time, could pay back the general fund.
I was interested if you had considered that idea as if you were going to go and have a city employee lock the gate at dusk, or how that would work out. Yeah. Since we have hillside enforcement for the hours of operation.
Yeah.
The challenge that I see is that we have the same challenge with managing the ATVs as we do with the question of the bike trail, and that is we don't want to spend money before we've done this planning process. But yet I totally agree with Stephanie's point that we need something immediate, but I also agree with the concern she brought up last time, which is you put signs one place and that invites them to go find new places that aren't already eroded.
Yeah, the danger of putting in a gate.
So then we have a wider spread problem, the places they've already used that we have to fix, and now new places. Mm-hmm. And so I think I might feel more comfortable just holding off for now, getting the data, finding out how much they're using spots where they shouldn't be, and then getting the whole plan, and then really getting tight on enforcement once we decide what's really going to go up there.
Just way of disclosure, I took Steve and Bruce, Mike Smith, Cassie on a little idea jaunt up there on one of our field trips. And, a lot depends on what the council wants to use with the property. So I want to recognize that. But, if we are, part of it is not just the future uses. It's part of this management strategy is what we're going to allow the property to be used as. And I certainly showed them some preliminary, really 30,000 foot level way to manage ATV users in that area that gives them something as a substitute than the choices that they're making, because it's just simply randomness on the use right now. In talking to a few that I know that have ridden in that area, there's the local kids, for lack of better terms, that use it frequently, and a lot of your testing of the machines quickly to set them up to go out. It's a quick, easy to come here, test it out, check out their repairs. They might hit the B and up onto Skyline Drive, before they hit the season. So there's a lot of this random testing it out happening on that site. And I think there are some, if we decide that ATV has a merit in that area, and how we would then create a control and activities that are related to that type of use, I think are feasible. Everything will cost something to do, but I think that's part of my discussion of, rather than spend $500,000 handling all the drainage, maybe we could tag team some ideas, restore the land and the bowl area to its intended purposes, control the erosion, some of those expenditures, and then in a marginal cost way provide the different activities that the ATV users would be interested, rather than leaving them randomly to just ride there.
But I have a problem with starting enforcement procedures without educating first. I mean, we could say
the signs have been up there for years and years and years.
We could say they should know, but we're dealing with youth here as well too. And I think, what about the idea of you have a class one night, or that the police force does, or just something of that nature, to help them to know. I mean, my big concern is safety. I mean, drainage and erosion is important, but obviously safety, not losing somebody. So that's just a suggestion, just an idea.
Fix it, ticket, go to this class, and you're out of the ticket.
No, education before, but ticket, but maybe so.
But it
Yeah,
would be.
You know,
maybe that's a really great
maybe
idea.
a booth set up at the dike area with flashing lights and education materials and explaining with maps, explaining where it's legal. You know, maybe a police officer, rather than writing tickets, he's up there just with a table and maps and educating everyone who comes that day, you know, or something for a few hours.
That's not a bad idea either. I had a citizen approach me last week after we'd talked about this already, and I had expressed concern because I knew he used the area, and he is very frustrated about the possibility of less access for ATV type things, and very willing to help in enforcement and patrol type things. So he called me and said, okay, I've got the video of this guy. He's clear up on the hillside, way. I mean, it's not even remotely feasible that he could think that it was okay. He says, I've got the video, I've got the clear license plate. Who do I turn it into? And as we tracked it down, it turned out that it's Forest Service land, and he can get a $15 ticket for watershed infraction.
$15?
And I thought, you know, maybe some of us different stakeholders need to get together and say, hey, this is important, and we need to do something to convey that.
Forest Service definitely a party.
Because he turned in the information and he's received no contact. I mean, he didn't forward the video, but he said, here's my name and number, and I'll be happy. He stopped the driver and talked to him and said, hey, you're not supposed to be up there. They had a little conversation about it, but there's been no...
Did he say anything about the response from the driver?
The driver said that he had sat there for about 5 minutes debating whether he should go up there, whether that was a good idea. And he said, well, if it took that long, you should have known that was not a good idea. But no contact from an enforcement perspective once he'd turned in that information, which is frustrating. If we have people that are willing to try to help, to have them not be given the time of day really from the agency that has jurisdiction.
Well, and another thought I had with, I knew about the guy that Stephanie had talked to and saying that, you know, we need to get it into the high schools. I wonder if there's any way we could talk the local high schools into putting a 30-minute something in their driver's ed program, telling them about the area and what can happen and what the restrictions are. I mean, if we could get the high school to just work with us a little bit and put some of that in their driver's ed program, you know, 20 minutes, 30 minutes through the whole course, just to say, you know what, you've got this and you're going to lose it if you abuse it.
You know, I was thinking of the master plan and education effort. If you have a master plan, some of the ideas Corey was putting is having a banked oval track and a mud bog and things that we actually help to improve some fun facilities up there for ATVs. That could be part of the education that they're coming to find out, oh, what's Centerville building for the ATVs, and these are the rules and where you can and can't go, and so that might kind of go hand in hand once there is a plan that's been approved.
That's where I would head with the ATV use. Is I think a lot of it is it's because it's so unstructured. People are making their own fun, but if it becomes a little bit more defined, that'll help out. On the enforcement issue, I see where you're at, and I agree to a large extent that enforcement is appropriate in the egregious cases. The problem with where we're trying to sample users, it's like administering a broad antibiotic. You don't know exactly what it is you cured or you changed, and I think where it's at right now, if we're sampling the users, we get a more frank and maybe less rancor-filled answer if we're dealing with the uses as they are now. And I'm just looking at it pragmatically from that standpoint. And I'd like to see us do something significant to accommodate several of the use cases that have been talked about, and fairly quickly. I think the longer it remains unstructured, as we've already seen what the drainage situation is and where the gun club is on the maintenance of the drainage by the road. There's a lot of areas that are just in poor repair, and we need to do something.
So I think I hear what you're saying, George, is don't set aside or suspend or hold off on the enforcement until we can get a census or survey of the users up there. Is that what you're saying?
Outside of, I mean, if there's somebody hill climbing, tearing up the side of the dike, give them a ticket. And I think Lisa was looking up the number. You looked like you were looking up numbers for it.
But I think I also hear that once we've done that.
Well, you will affect the outcome if you stand up there handing out even fix-it tickets. You will affect the outcome of what people's perceptions are of their rights and their usage. Right. And I'd like to have a fair and honest dialogue with all parties. Every one of them is going to be passionate about their recreational use.
Well, I think what we could add, since there's kind of this immediacy issue, we could add in, moving fairly quickly with the assessment. I think even ESI engineering will be fairly quick with that. So we could move fairly quick through that phase of it. And then we could add in a component down at the city staff level on maybe some temporary management practices for the property, and come back to the council with some of those ideas and see what you sanction. So I could add that into the flow matrix.
And with Tammy, with your idea of kind of accelerating and adding more meetings, in principle, I'm not opposed to it as long as they have the actionable information. If a lot of this information can be preloaded into the process, great. If it looks like it's going to lag, then that's going to have to stretch out, because the informed decision is what we need.
Right.
So I like kind of blending the mayor's comment and Tammy's enforcement with some, maybe it isn't a fix-it tickets, maybe it's a warning, but starting to put a stake in the ground that we're going to do something.
Yeah, I think we can put in a module where we can look at Bruce's ideas with the stakes, so we start defining some limitations right now with the conditions of the property, regardless of the future uses and outcomes of it. I think we can do some assessments work fairly quick and get a lot of that data together, with Steve committing other staff to help, like our GIS person and so forth, and Bruce to put that together. I think we can also discuss a second part of that is what kind of preliminary enforcement that we're going to do to, lack of better terms, stop the madness after we've hit that point.
I would just note, I think that sounds good, and I would just note that I think we should have the plan before we put the new signs up, because I think as soon as the new signs go up, then we need to have immediate, intense enforcement so that we don't get the problem of them just finding new places to go where they're not supposed to go. So have that be right.
Well, this is actually an annual thing. Every year we replace a bunch of the Carsonite signs that have gotten torn out or broken off. But you want to hold off on that, to what we normally do as far as just awareness signs?
I think that's helpful. We should still put them up.
I would still go.
I would not be inclined to hold off. Okay. One of the things that I guess,
Chief and I both felt like we should hurry and try to get those up there right away, and so we've got some ordered.
One of the things I'm pretty passionate about is the comment about our signs getting shot up. Mm-hmm. And I think we ought to get something on the website. Anything like that is not going to be tolerated, and if we find it, will be dealt with severely, period, end of conversation.
That's discharge of a firearm within city limits. It's
I
actually
understand.
really bad.
Yeah.
It's not just shooting up a sign.
Yeah.
Our trail kiosks, every year we replace the plexiglass because they're shot,
One of my thoughts, Steve, you found that master's thesis intern person, that's our new recorder, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mackenzie. Wasn't that Mackenzie?
Before she was hired, she was
our intern.
She was our intern.
Yeah.
Is it possible that we could find another intern to be assigned to be assigned between Corey and Bruce to do some of this legwork, where it might be significantly beneficial to that person as well as to us?
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea. If we can find someone, that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
You might even ask Mackenzie.
If She knows someone?
Yeah. Yeah, not that she wants to apply.
I just had to append that.
You know, that she might know someone.
Yeah, we can certainly go down that road. I was wondering, when we do get to the case of enforcement, we may need to appropriate some money for overtime for our police officers for that targeted purpose. Otherwise, it's going to detract them from other
Did
things.
Paul get the side-by-side from?
Yeah, we have a side-by-side that's on low-cost lease, I will call it.
Yeah, so he got another one for this year?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes.
I think so, yeah.
And that might even come to just the presence of the vehicle up there has a tendency to curb behaviors, whether there's an officer in it or not, if they see the vehicle up there. So,
Park it up.
yeah, if they see the police vehicle up there on the hillside, it will curb some of the behavior. Not all of it, but some.
I don't know. There were big Centerville City logos on the
But
trucks when we went up there. and-
That's Public Works. It doesn't say police. It's a different attitude.
That's true.
No offense to Public Works or Parks.
We see it all the
has a
time.
different attitude when people see it.
Those are just those utility guys. We can do whatever we
Yeah,
want.
they don't care what I do, but the police, they might throw me in jail.
So good discussion. Back to this management plan, you've gone to a lot of effort. I like it. The quicker we can do it, the better, because you always have overruns in anything. So
Yeah, I don't want to portray I can't dedicate time. I certainly can
well, I'm not expecting you to do it
dedicate
all
time. I was
for
just saying how fast
We're
and
talking
everything.
about an intern and some other resources
That
for
would
you
be
as well,
great.
too.
Yeah, but we do need somebody of Corey's experience to manage the process and lead the
Right.
process.
I
In
agree.
fact, I'll admit, I'm the one that asked him if he'd be willing to do this, so that's why he
I
put
think that's
this
a good fit.
together.
Yeah, I think a good pick, and I think he's done an excellent job on what we were looking for.
He's just going to be balancing this with any other goals that the city council agrees with the planning commission ought to be tackled as well, which is
Yet to
a
be determined.
work session for the next month sometime. But we can certainly get some resources to help him out. But we need his leadership in this process, and Bruce tied to him at the hip in this process as well. So
Yeah, I certainly can use my resources for that.
So is there a motion to come out of this? There's just a discussion to
Well, why don't
proceed,
we do this? Corey, what do you think you've heard here?
What do I think I heard?
What's your summary, Corey?
That I didn't completely miss the mark with the management plan.
Good job.
And I did hear that there is some rapid response issues to what's kind of happening in a somewhat low-key way, so we don't thwart, some good data that comes out of it, but that appears as a normal operation of businesses and we can work out. And I'll plug in kind of that split element of what we're doing now into the management plan, as well as what kind of enforcement would come after at a certain point that we can discuss. Not something that's a finalized version yet, but these are the targeted efforts to be made in a split manner. And then, and I think a lot of, depending on what we do with resources internally that we can pull together versus somebody as an intern, I think by the time Kevin comes out with his information, we could definitely be underway with creating something and then discuss at that point in time when we got that assessment data, is it a 4 week? Because I think there's some merit to doing something together and not taking 6 months and spacing it out. And so we can come to that determine of what at a staff level we think we could support and accomplish. And that'd be kind of a second run by with the council. So I do the management plan, edit it a little bit to hit the targeted issues we've talked about, and then run that back to the council for information.
And in the meantime, if we could find out if we could get someone else on board, because that would affect, I think, the timeline, which would be great.
Yes.
Sounds like a good summary to me.
I'd like to throw a goal line at that as well, which is by next spring, we're pushing dirt up there in some fashion, whether that's
Drainage or trails.
drainage or improvement to a track, but there's dirt moving next spring.
Something like, yeah, I agree.
Not planning for 2 years.
That's why I wanted to find a couple,
Yes.
I agree with that completely. That's why I wanted to find a couple months that we could just kind of squish back so that.
I think we can squish it back from the end of the year issue and even begin earlier so that you can. I was on the same time frame with actually doing something by next spring because it was the whole targeted of when we maybe put into a grant and some other things that are associated with it. I just didn't want to jump the gun on where you wanted to land yet in dreaming up this management plan. But if there's a little more aggressiveness to this plan, I will adjust it to accommodate that more aggressive stance.
I'll pretend I didn't read your email on this.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
I think I would even go as far as to suggest that we authorize an amount not to exceed $3,000 at this point, that between Corey, Bruce, and Steve can be used to keep this effort moving.
Would this include like financing an intern outside of regular staff? Or
$3,000 isn't going to do much for an intern.
No.
But I'd be willing to come back and add for that. But
it'll cover a while. Interns aren't that expensive.
Okay. Anything that moves this along.
I like the urgency. My heart's feeling a lot
hearing
more
that.
excited again. So I like it.
So you want to?
I'm making
Okay.
a motion that we authorize up to $3,000 at this point, and it can be increased if we're seeing a need to increase it between Steve, Corey, and Bruce that can be spent to move this management plan process forward.
Second.
From council contingency or?
Yes, council
Yes, from
contingency.
council contingency.
Do we have some in there? I
Yes,
just want to make
yes,
sure.
I think you're okay.
Contingent on contingency.
So we have a motion and a second. Do we need a roll call, or can we just do an aye vote?
Expending funds, yes.
Yes.
Geez, that's right. we're
Just
spending
do it
money.
all the time, that's easy.
So let's start with Councilwoman Fillmore.
Aye.
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 Okay, 5-0, that motion passes.
So the three of us and Cassie, maybe you're going to
Yeah,
involve Cassie
we'll-
in this, so the four of us get together and
This is one of those fun things that you didn't see coming.
But, you know, do you want to include also the chief? I know they.
Sure.
Oh, yeah,
That would
yeah,
be good.
Every year
definitely.
they normally do
Yes.
some enforcement, and I don't think you want to just not do any, but
No.
at least what they normally can do.
Yes, chief, and any others we haven't identified that
Sure.
we think ought to be a player, Mike Smith and whatever, we'll
Sure.
bring them in as needed.
Thanks, Corey.
All right,
If you don't have enough to do, I can find more for you to do, okay?
I have enough, but it's usually the stuff that's not always that fun. This is actually in that visionary as well as something I didn't anticipate.
Yeah, in fact, when I
what a
asked
planner
Corey,
does.
when I asked Corey about doing this, it was kind of this sounds kind of
It was.
fun,
Mike
creative.
Smith as well.
and-
Mike Smith says, I love doing recreation mapping versus fire hydrants and storm drains.
Well, I called Corey on a matter last week, and he was more than happy to talk to me about it while he was driving to St. George, and I was about to fly back from there, so appreciate all you do. Okay, thanks, Corey. Is everybody good to move to the next?
We better, because we've had people waiting.
Yes, we have. So let's go to, while we have you up here, Bruce, to item 8, to continue discussion about creating more cemetery capacity. We tabled it and put it off for this week, and we're glad to have you with us. So you want to start in on that?
You bet. So Steve asked if I would explain, first of all, the situation in the cemetery. And Steve, I don't know if, are you
Which,
looking?
you want this map or the plot map?
The plot map, if you can pull up a
Sure.
computer plot map.
Yeah.
I think it'll be the easiest to explain. And you'll see here, the computer shows all of the graves that are in the cemetery, and which ones are filled and which ones are sold. Here we go. And if you zero in just on that bottom row of A there, Steve.
Right here?
Yep. The bottom few rows there, if you can. I don't know if you can enlarge it any more than that, but.
Yeah.
So you can see in this picture the.
You want to come over here with the pointer?
Sure. Can you a little more?
What's that, a little more larger? Like
Look at that.
Okay, so the gray, there's actually a name and a date on the gray. These are spaces where someone is buried in these gray spaces. Pink are sold, and green are available for residents with immediate need.
I thought we had 20 spaces.
Yeah, there's a whole lot more there than I was expecting to see.
Yep.
A whole lot more what?
Available.
Green, available.
Well,
No,
no,
those are gray.
that's what, it's the reverse. I thought we had more, there's like 4.
So we might have a color issue here.
Yeah, I think
So
it's a
this
color
one,
thing.
this one's I was joking because there actually is only showing one on this map. But we actually have, so the situation is,
okay.
it's right here. It shows some grave spaces. Some people are buried. It shows that there's 3 sold spaces, and here's the next people who are actually buried there. When we go out with a tape measure and actually lay it out, this computer's showing 3 spaces, but there's actually 5 right here. So we have a couple of extras. And I think I explained in our work session back a while ago that through time, over the years, from the time of the pioneers and the church owning the cemetery and handwritten records on things, that we have records of 40 individuals that are buried in our cemetery, but we don't know where they're buried. They don't have markers or graves and things. And so by filling in all of these gaps, and so we've gone through the first 3 or 4 rows of this bottom of plot A and found 30 extra spaces. And being conservative, also making sure that we're not putting ourselves in a bind where we're going to say there's a space there and not be able to actually dig it.
Let me ask you one question before we go on the pioneer burials. What was was the whole area historically the cemetery, or was it a portion? Do we have at least a guess that they're in section A to this side, or are they anywhere on that property that's unknown?
I think they could be anywhere on the property.
And it's been historically the same footprint, the whole area?
Yeah, so the west slope was all added in the late 80s and early 90s. So that area is probably, there's not any chance of any unmarked pioneer graves being west of the road.
Okay.
That was actually
You want this?
Yeah, so I'm talking about this area. If you come up, this is Porter Lane. You come into the cemetery, here's the maintenance building. This is what we call the west road, and this is the west slope that slopes down. This was all filled in and improved in the late after the floods of '87 and that. So chances of there being anything in this area, slim to none. But all of this area, which is plot A, plot B is just right here, this little rectangle, highly probable, and plot C, still probable, a little less probable, but still probable as far as disturbing some of those unmarked graves.
Okay.
And in that work session, the direction I was given was that we know you're going to disturb all 40 of those graves by filling in these gaps, but we still want to do it, right? Okay, so that's what we've done. We've gone and started finding where all the gaps are. Last fall, before winter, we got through evaluating the first 4 rows of plot A and came up with 20 plus spaces.
So what are you going to do if you find Mr. 140? I mean, what happens if you find one of those 40?
So in digging a grave, we come across remains. So this happens, and what we do is we stop, collect all of the remains that we can find, and we put them all into a box. And we dig the grave a couple feet deeper, put the box in, and then we put the grave back to ready for the next.
So then you bury someone on top of it.
Yeah. So, good question.
And do you attempt to identify those remains or not? You simply just log, we've got 2 people buried here.
We put a note that
yeah, in your records.
We put a note in the city's records that there were unidentified remains that were buried below this grave.
And then you put those remains on top of the new.
Underneath. So we dig the grave a couple feet deeper, put the box in, bury it, and then the new vault goes in on top. So are there any questions of how we're finding extra spaces?
Bruce, let me make note what you told me. I made a note at that time back in February. You said you looked at your guys looked at the first 5 rows.
Okay.
And found about 30 spaces in section A. and that there are 32 rows in Section A, so you are expecting to find quite a few more
Yeah.
when they have time to continue this evaluation on site, right?
Yes, we anticipate after we evaluate all of A, B, and C that we'll come close to 200 extra spaces that we can make available to, the way it is right now is residents with an immediate need. That would
So
be,
are we going to be putting somebody in between a husband and a wife?
No, so good question. So are we going to be splitting up people's families or if they have plots? So that's one of it's a little bit time consuming, but as we found these extra spaces, we then went over the maps with the records of who owns what spaces, and then we put the extra spaces in between owners so that they're different owners or different families. That is where we're putting those extra graves. So we're not splitting up families, or if someone's bought 4 spaces, we don't want to put an extra space in between any of those 4. We want to put it at the end of those 4 between the next owner.
Well, Judgment Day, they might have to make some new friends.
Yeah.
Is there any possibility that you'd be forced to move a current grave, other than the unknown ones?
I don't see any situation where the city would have to move a grave.
Well, because this number and this number were supposed to be at this proximity, and they were at this proximity, and so they've got a space and a half, so to speak.
Oh, in those situations, if there's not enough for a full grave, we don't count it. We just it's just a little extra elbow room for that graves is all. So yeah, unless there's at least 3.5 feet or so space available, giving plenty of area for the existing graves and existing spaces, that would create a lot of extra work and problems for the operations if we were doing things that tightly. So yeah, no, unless there's a good 3 or 4 feet of extra space, we don't count it.
Bruce, I think this would be an appropriate point to express a couple of your concerns, though, that might lead to some policy decisions pertaining to filling in these spaces.
Yes.
And this aerial might help illustrate one of those issues about that's related to getting access to these spaces.
So as you fill in all of your gaps, and the trend now, it used to be popular to do a flat stone, and I have not seen a flat stone go in, in quite a while. They're very rare. Most folks want to have an upright monument. And so this makes access more and more difficult as more and more monuments go in, that we have to work trucks and equipment around, and just regular mowing maintenance issues. So one suggestion, recommendation that I strongly recommend is that in these extra spaces that we make available to people, that we say flat stone only. That you're allowed to, you can be buried in our cemetery, but you've got to put a flat marker there so that it doesn't create another monument and another maintenance issue and another access difficulty for us. Another trend that has been happening is quite a few people in Centerville, thanks to Bill and all of his efforts of trying to make people be prepared, is they're buying their headstones in advance and putting their monuments in the cemetery. No one's died. They've put their monument there with their birth dates and their family names, and they go up and they look at their headstone and they polish it, and it's there for 10 years or more until they finally pass away, and then the stone's moved and they're buried, and this is becoming a trend where we're seeing more and more people are buying their headstone in advance. It's a great deal for the cemetery or for the monument company, because they can sell another expensive monument and have it placed, but we store it then. We pay the storage fees, and we have to mow around it and trim around it and be careful not to bump it or scratch it for umpteen years until someone's actually buried there. We're just storing people's monuments for them, and we'd like to also suggest that the city make a policy that you can't put a headstone in our cemetery unless you have a body to go with it. We don't want to just store people's expensive monuments and mow around them and trim around them forever until they need it.
I'm not sure I accept blame for that.
That's a different type of
different kind of preparedness. But we're seeing it more and more. And I don't know if there's a marketing effort being made, but it seems to be happening quite a bit now. So those are two recommendations: the not allowing the headstone to be put in until they actually have a grave being dug, and then the other is that the new spaces that we sell we require a flat stone only.
Is it worth considering a significant premium for non-flat stones instead of?
I think that's fairly
Flat stone
hard for the
only?
people that have already purchased up there with the idea that they can have a high.
People who have already purchased.
I'm not sure I would go retroactive. I'm just saying prospectively.
Yeah. So back to the other map, all of the pink, it's all sold. I think at the time they were sold. We charge, I think it's $100. If you have a flat stone put in, there's no fee. But if you have an upright stone, the city charges another $100 to have that
So there is already
upright
a
stone.
fee.
So there's an extra fee that they pay if they want to have an upright monument. But when you're buying a $2,000 stone, another $100 doesn't seem to be a deterrent.
Can we adjust the $100 fee?
You can do
We can
whatever,
do whatever
you
we
want. Yeah.
But
You
you're
are
not
the
recouping
you are
the
the
costs on
owners.
But even so, when I watch, I am amazed sometimes that you can even get anybody in to dig for a new grave. As I watch how they have to maneuver back and forth among the headstones that are already there.
Can your tractor drive across a flat headstone?
Yeah. It's not an issue so much with our tractor. It has great big wide balloon tires. The issues where the damage happens is usually a vault truck, where it's just a single wheel on a heavy truck that's carrying two heavy vaults or something like that, or a heavy dump truck that's loaded, and that once in a while that's the issue. And so we do try to keep those from driving on stones as much as we can. You bet.
Well, I can go 50% with you on there. I am completely in agreement unless there is a body occupying a vault that you don't do the headstone. That makes perfect sense to me. The flat stones I've never been a fan of. Mostly I have a sister who's buried with a flat stone, and it's a maintenance nightmare for the family to come and cut away the grass, and it always looks ragged no matter what you do to make a flat stone look good. I think that the character of an upright stone adds to a cemetery's overall aesthetics. I've just never been a fan of the flat stone for a number of reasons.
I kind of agree with it. You should have the option.
So what if you sell these spaces and you can't get your equipment in?
So then we have to have stones moved. We have to go to the cost of having a vault company come or headstone company come with their truck and their winch. They have to move stones out of the way enough for us to get equipment in.
Is there any way to determine before you start selling, which ones are easily accessible and sell those 20 first, and then before we open it up to incur further excessive costs?
Such as to dictate that if you buy the ones that are in the center and then work out towards the outside?
The problem with that is that we allow them to buy two. If someone has
Well, I actually meant on the outside, but I guess that's a good point too.
So that's part of the reason why we started at the bottom of A is in the wintertime it's difficult to get equipment into the center areas of the cemetery, and so by finding the gaps in those ones that are closest to the road, it's easier for us to access those through the winter. So that's part of why we started there. But the problem is if we allow a resident at time of need to buy the one they need, but then also one for a spouse or to buy another one. And so that other one may be 20, 30 years before we actually dig that one.
So if you sell one in the middle, would you have to remove as many as 5 or 10 headstones?
So good question. The way we've got the cemetery set up is Plot A was designed with just 9-foot graves. And then plot A and B. Plot C, we've gone to a little bit wider and a little bit longer so we can get equipment in. So they're 10-foot graves. And I've explained to Steve before, when we started doing the double depth graves, those we sell. You buy a burial right, but you don't actually know which space you'll be going in until the actual time when you're buried. You just go in the next space as part of a cave-in safety issue. The problem with that is we're filling in every single grave as we go along the rows. And so you'll notice in the new section of E where those you have a wall of headstones, and then 10 feet later you have another wall of headstones. So there is no option to go in between. And so we'll need a piece of equipment that can go down that 10-foot area, which is actually a little less once they put a stone in. Each, the stone on this end, the stone on this side, you end up with, a more narrow corridor to get in and out. And a mini excavator can do that. It can't do a double depth grave. It can't dig deep enough. The current one that we have. And so when we get to our last row, on the double depth graves, we're going to have to either purchase or lease a piece of equipment that can actually dig that last row of graves, and however long it takes us to dig them, which I imagine about a year. That's about how long it's been taking us to do a complete row is about a year. We actually will need a special piece of equipment to do that last row, and then as things get more and more difficult in the cemetery, it'll be nice. It might be something where we just keep that piece of equipment. But they have a more narrow track. They can go in, and then the machine can just rotate. Whereas right now we dig them with a backhoe that's got about a 20-foot wide from bucket to backhoe area that's got to sit somewhere in order to dig with that backhoe.
So it sounds like to get to the middle of these burial spaces, it's more of an issue of equipment, because I would just hate to sell a plot and then at the time of need find out you can't get in.
Yeah, no, and we wouldn't, as far as that, we would not recommend selling a space or saying there's extra space here unless we felt that, we can get into this, we can dig it here.
Great. And then just one more comment. I think I've mentioned this in the past, but there is a state statute that says if you operate a cemetery, even if you're a municipality, you have to record a plat, an accurate plat of the cemetery. And so the question has always been procedurally, if you're going to add some lots, is this a plat amendment to our cemetery? You're going to change those lines. Admittedly, I've discussed this with the county recorder, and they say we don't record these plats. But I think as part of the process, especially if we're adding spaces, we should probably look procedurally at that statute and decide how to go about
recording it with the county. You bet. And we're doing it with our software provider that as we find the extra spaces, they're helping us to put those into our computer map, so they will show up on the future versions of our computer software.
Okay, maybe as
and we can just
send
a copy of that to, once we are finished evaluating and finding all of the gaps and spaces and get them all put in places in between owners and everything's the way we want it, then we can send a copy of that to the county for sure.
And if you can keep track of current and amended, and then it can be very clear, these are our new, this is the amended plat.
Yeah.
That'd be helpful.
You bet.
Are any of these difficulty spots a good candidate for a columbarium?
No.
None of them?
No. Yeah, there are a few larger where we found like five enough space for an extra 5 graves, but that's probably the maximum that we're aware of, and that's not enough to do a columbarium unless.
But you had in mind some other.
We have some areas that I've recommended in the past where I think you could put some columbariums.
I just wonder, before we move on to that, if, and the council might feel differently, but this is a pretty big policy decision and discussion, and I just think maybe we're due for another work session, or at least a more clear agenda item that we might have a lively debate and make some policy decisions. And I think it will take quite a long discussion, and where tonight we're already an hour, 20 minutes behind, and I don't think we're going to end up coming to any conclusions. I would suggest that we put this on either a future agenda and be more clear that we would probably be writing policy and or do another work session, cemetery work session, when it can fit in.
Bruce, what you're bringing to us as far as what's additional spaces available right now, great information. I'm inclined to think that, I was thinking even before we started into the agenda that this would give us a good overview, and that it would take some time to really discuss it.
Yeah,
I think as well too. What's your feeling?
The idea is that this will buy you a little bit of time. to explore and decide if you want to look at another cemetery location, or if you want to do some columbariums, if you want to look at some other options. The extra spaces that we're able to find will give you at the way that the policy is written now, it'd probably give you a couple years before.
I was going to say, how many new ones do we need per year?
Well, your policy right now is that you only sell available spaces on an immediate need
Right.
basis to a resident.
Right. So about how many is that?
We're averaging about 70 burials a year. A lot of those are some of these are the pink ones, though, that people already own. So someone who comes that doesn't have a space, that has immediate need, I don't have a good handle on it, but it's less. It's going to be a lot less, maybe,
Well,
maybe 20 or 30, I don't know.
I thought we did, when we went through budget, we determined that we only had about 50 burials this last year, compared to 70 a year
That's
normally.
true. That's true. The number's dropping.
And that's
Yeah, you bet.
because we didn't have any to sell in
Sell.
advance. Well,
That's true.
we weren't selling, we couldn't sell to non-residents.
Yeah. I'll bet since you made your policy of only selling at immediate need, I'll bet you've only sold 4 or 5 spaces.
Well, and don't get me
you know.
wrong, I do want to address the question of what policy to write to make this work well. Like, we have an immediate situation where we have need for more spaces and you found some. Fantastic. But I can sense that the debate will need to be more thorough and given a little more time, just what
Yeah.
kind of headstones to allow and what kind of charges, extra charges might be, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so we don't have to tackle it all, but I would want to immediately have us come back with a more clear agenda item that we'd be writing some policy about how to deal with selling these spaces so that that can happen sooner rather than later. And then at a separate time, probably talk more.
Sure.
In a work session, all of the other issues.
Not sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying 2 points in time in the future?
Well, right now, how many spaces, not selling these ones that you have found, how many do we have to sell? That one green one?
In this plot, yeah, there's probably 4 or 5. I think there's a couple of double. I think
so
you have some double depth grades.
We've already got policy in place for him to sell the others.
Right, we're already making these
It's already
30
there.
available.
Those 30 are already available
Yeah.
with policy that we've set.
Okay,
So we
but
don't
I-
have an immediate panic, I'm with you. I
Yeah,
think we
there's-
can look into
Okay.
it, but I don't think it needs to be something immediate. We do have 30 and we've only sold 5 in several months, so.
Okay. I do want to say, though, that I lean towards going with staff's recommendation because I don't want us to be, I guess, selling them and then having headstones that make the future maintenance of the cemetery. I mean, we still have the question of should we be in this business, let alone being in this business, making it harder with each new burial to be in this business.
So let me ask, is there seem to be a consensus that at least that policy change is supported by the council, and that is to stop the practice of having headstones put in place in advance?
I would be in
Yes.
favor of that, making the headstones placement after an interment.
Council seems to be okay with that, so I mean, we could.
I've seen that people have an increased desire to have it the way they want it, rather than leave it to whatever their kids think was a good idea. And so there's more of a trend of buying their own casket and that funeral planning that actually gets marketed.
And I don't think we'll hurt the private industry that's doing monuments. I think they can still pre-sell those the same way they do the caskets. They just won't have it sitting in their living room for 10 years before they use it.
I actually met someone who had it in their front yard.
Some people may choose that, but the way it is now, though, they're selling it, making it, and installing it, and kind of washing their hands of it until someone dies. Then they come and carve the death date in it, and we bear all of the work and difficulty of maintaining around that. And I would rather shift that back to the folks that are making the money on the stone. That if you want to make it, you store it. if you want to just sell it pre-need and then make it when they need it, then however you work that out.
Honestly, the cemetery issue is becoming difficult enough that it's probably not smart to pre-buy it and pre-have it made, because unless a cemetery allows you to install it, Because policy might change over time as well. I mean, we could, if we decided that we really needed to for cost savings and maintenance accessibility, say all the existing sold spots can only place flat headstones.
I don't think you could legally do that because when they bought it, there was an understanding. I don't think you could change something that, I mean.
I think you can change
You could.
policy.
Do you think you could?
Yeah. Legally, you could, whether you want to politically.
Right. Two different things.
Well, so do we have to have a public hearing to change this policy?
Yeah, I would think that this is in your ordinances where we talk about headstones and we say where you can have them. You would want to make this clear and upfront in your ordinances. Ordinance in this section of the code, which would be Title 8, does not require a public hearing, but you could certainly have one if you'd like to.
But right now, we're just talking about the new few you've found.
No, we're talking.
No, we're talking about the
talking
headstones.
about placement of headstones
okay.
in advance.
Yeah, pre-need stones,
Right.
and then the other is the possible extra spaces if we maybe put a restriction that those would be flat stones only to not fill in
Yeah.
a
And I
solid
think
one.
that issue is part of the broader picture.
Yeah, I
in
do
my
too. I don't
opinion.
think
But
that's
this other
something
one
we could-
saying no headstones, we can certainly do that.
That's what I'm trying to determine, if you're okay with us bringing back an amendment regarding that specific issue.
I can picture the demographic already for the
I
public
think we
hearing.
are.
And if we do bring that back, do you want us to post it for public comment or public hearing
I don't think that one's would be necessary.
for that specific issue?
If it's not retroactive, I don't think anybody would, if we're not telling people to pick them up and move them if they've got them there. I
Right,
think
no,
it'll be
that's
fine.
not
You
what
know,
we're intending.
I can, how Bountiful City Cemetery deals with this issue is they only allow one upright monument per 4 continuous spaces. So for every 4 spaces someone buys the rights to be buried in, they're only allowed to put 1 upright monument. The other 3 have to have flat markers. We don't have a rule like that, and we need something because it's becoming a difficulty issue of whether or not we can do. And it'll end up coming back on the city. The cost of having a vault company or monument company come out and move 5 or 6 stones so you can dig a grave will come back on the city, and you'll end up having to pay the price for making that decision.
We're already not charging enough to cover our costs. That would really increase that situation, so.
So again, I think I hear we could go forward with the one specific policy change without a public hearing. Of course, it'll be posted on the agenda if somebody wants to.
If Bill feels strongly about it, I'd support a public hearing. I mean, I'm not opposed to that.
I'm not opposed to it.
I'm not
I feel
opposed to it
strongly
either.
about it.
I don't think it matters.
There's
I don't-
extra work for staff posting, right? Doing the notices. and-
Well, I mean, we just show it on the agenda for
be on
public
the agenda.
comment. We
Okay.
could make it in, just public comment, not an official public hearing, but. If
Yeah,
you-
let's open it for public hearing, because if somebody has a real strong feeling, I'd be interested to see what their reasoning is.
Okay.
Probably because they've got it ordered and it's coming next week. Yeah, that's fine. I'd go with the public hearing.
I just couldn't imagine seeing my name on the headstone. I don't want to go there.
And I agree with Tammy's comment that I think, and whether it's 1 meeting or 2 meetings, I think we need to get together to
Work it out.
work out a lot of these issues that are facing us.
Yeah, because when I look at the lead sheet on this and just the recommendations, you know, we've covered existing spots we have and what additional we could make available. But when we talk about new land, when we talk about constructing the columbarium, even if we should be in the business of this, that's something that we, in my opinion, would be in a work session. So I don't know how the council feels, but
I think so.
Okay.
Sounds
We've
good.
done one before, we can do it again on the same topic.
So,
Okay.
so what did you have, Bruce? Did you have more on your presentation?
No,
Okay.
I think I'm mainly here to answer questions so that.
so I have one question. I look at your page up there, and then I look at the aerial, and there's a whole lot more pink spaces up there than it looks like there are vacant spaces here.
There's also a lot of trees that appear to overlay in those spaces as well.
Well, that's because you're seeing a lot of pre-need stones.
Okay. Good. That may be the answer. I don't know.
No,
I mean,
I think the issue you're seeing is that pink. This one is only just a small fraction of the cemetery. This area, if you flip
but when you had the whole thing up before, it looked the same.
Flip back to that other one, Steve. Everything you're seeing here is right here.
Oh, okay.
So, when you're looking at that, you're not getting scale same. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Bruce.
Bruce, thanks so much for all you did. I just want to compliment you. I was meeting with a client today that called you up about doing a lighting ceremony for a young woman, a young girl that has a disease, and because of all the great work you've done with and your staff with our Christmas decorations in the park in the summer. And you know what I was talking about?
You bet, yeah.
And he said you were fantastic to work with, and it was just an invaluable resource.
Oh, good.
So thanks for all you do. So it's kind of fun on my day-to-day work to hear great things about what our people are doing within the city.
We have some, especially I'm biased, of course, but especially in our Parks Department, we have some great employees.
So thanks so much. Does anybody need a break? We don't have tons left, but it is 9:30 or.
Well, we've got an RDA meeting after this.
So.
We do?
A very brief RDA.
It's very brief, though. We'll be all right.
We're almost done.
To approve some minutes. So we move on? Okay. So item 9, Mayor's Report. I mentioned, put a couple things on the agenda here. What was included in your materials was the minutes from the February meeting. The April meeting was supposed to happen on April 9th, and it was deferred until April 16th. And I found out it was deferred so attorneys could draft a number of documents relating to the bond process. And received those Friday afternoon. There was 50 pages in one attachment, 205 pages in another.
You got right through those, did you?
Yeah. I wrote an email back to the UAI members that, hey, if they're going to defer us for a week, and we have no reason whatsoever of knowing why they're deferring us, I thought it was maybe they weren't going to have a quorum present or something of that nature, that we needed more time to go over the documents. So one of the particular documents in relating to Layton City and their bonding to put in more equipment in their area, that was put off until next Monday. So it buys me some more time to go through that information. But and then what was included in your packet was, like I said, the February minutes. And I think I brought this up at one meeting one time because of their profits. They were proposing to our 2% increase each year on our debt, that would not increase because of our profits, and they would be refunding that money. In our situation, it just goes against some back operating assessments that prior councils had elected not to pay. And then they're looking to increase that based on profitability to 4% and 6% each year, as high as they can go. In regards to the fire service area, I had a meeting yesterday afternoon, and it related to our city big time, in as much as we approved a architect and a contractor for our new firehouse that's going to be built. Hogan and Associates is the contractor, and the architect, Steve, who was that again?
Gould
and Associates, yes.
They specialize in fire stations.
And there was some discussion, they had commented on the architect, their fee was 6% of the proposed cost, and there was some discussion amongst the board and the mayors about that going up if there was cost overruns, specifically with steel prices and how they were, and steel prices going up, and no, we were locked into that the 6% based on the existing price. And so we have an architect, we have a contractor for the new fire station, and the police chief, or fire chief, excuse me, did bring up that there were some issues that they're working through with our city in regards to access and some of those issues, which I believe he had met with Steve and Corey on a week earlier, and he felt confident that that it was going to go okay, and we were going to able to get through it.
Mayor, could I mention,
Sure.
in regards to the general contractor, did you want to identify who that is?
Didn't I say Hogan Associates?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh,
I thought I
okay.
did.
Okay,
Yeah.
and it's a general contractor / construction manager approach.
Yes.
Which is similar to what we used on the Performing Arts Center. And the advantage of that approach is that the contractor is on board while the architect is designing the project. And so the contractor helps the architect understand, be practical and
Yeah, it's a good approach.
and understand what's happening out there in the way of construction costs, and helps develop cost estimates along the way for this or that, this option or that option, and so forth. But there's still competition in the process, because the general contractor then bids out the pieces of the project. So
Yes.
I thought it was a good process for our particular facility.
Well, thanks for clarifying that. And I was brought, as I was running, that was brought to my attention, that form of construction. And I believe I had talked with you about it. And so, yeah, so thank you. And then within the last couple of weeks, a couple of fun things. We had lunch with the mayor last week that went really well. The kids really seemed to enjoy that. 6 students from each of our 4 schools, and Steve does a nice presentation, and I do one, and then of course they love the fire and the police chief as they put on all their gear. So they're the hit of the lunch. And then we opened our baseball season on Saturday, and I threw out the first pitch, and I was determined to not throw it in the dirt, and I did get it to home plate. It hit home plate, and I asked for a redo. And I threw it right down the middle, just like Clayton Kershaw went for the Dodgers. So the second pitch worked, but I wish I could have stayed more of the day, but fortunately the weather was good, and Matt Layton told me they had a great kickoff day. So that's my report. Any questions?
I just wanted to go back really quickly to UIA and
Yes.
let you know that they did adopt the resolution for the issuance of bonds.
They
for
did do that.
33 million, it's not to exceed, so I'm just going to say at the maximum 33 million and 6%. So they've adopted it, and they've given public notice for May 17th is when they're going out for issue.
They did adopt it unanimously and table till next Monday, the vote, specifically with the Layton City.
Yeah, Layton's 23 million,
Yeah.
is separate bonding.
So clarify that, if you would. The 33 million is that additional.
That's
that
Series 2018A bonds that would be UIA debt. And then Layton has a different bond structure they're looking at that's going to be backed by Layton City. The concern I have with the whole thing is that if we vote with that unanimously, the debt structure we have now goes to 2041. This tacks on another 7-8 years into the problem that we're going to get to, and it's not an immediate problem, but we get to the end of the bond term for Utopia, which is the infrastructure partner providing to UIA. When we get to the end of that bond term, the debt is satisfied, the agency by default breaks up. And then UIA is based all of its model on Utopia. So some future council, not ours, is going to have to worry about whether or not they stay in Utopia or they take their assets and go home and then release to UIA at a different rate. So there's 2 different structures coming up that will affect that in the future, from my view on it.
And I had an hour-long conversation on Friday afternoon with Roger Timmerman. He reported back to me that they'd be happy to come to meet with Centerville in a work session or other setting to share more history and detail on these incremental UA bonds if we so desired. I plan on getting with him individually, but he proposed that option as well too. So, thanks, George.
No problem.
Any other questions? Okay, great. We have a report, our liaison report from Councilmember Ince. Are you ready to do that, or you want to do it another time on the Citizen Corps Council Emergency Management and Davis Chamber of Commerce?
I didn't realize I was,
do that
I
next
didn't,
time?
sure, no, I did not realize I was on the docket.
That was our
We are-
mistake to not warn you in advance, Bill. I apologize.
We are, I think, prepared for the shakeout on Thursday and Saturday. The Centerville activity will primarily focus on Saturday. The city did a shelter-in-place exercise 3 weeks ago.
Thereabouts.
2 to 3 weeks ago
Month ago.
in this room. It was a little bit of a unorganized session, but we learned some things and hopefully are better prepared to do it in the future. There were about 35 people involved. It is a constant battle between people saying, what hasn't happened? I've been through this 6 times. I don't need to do it anymore. Becoming apathetic and the eventuality that we will one day have a difficulty. And so I would encourage everyone to participate Saturday morning, please.
Thank you. Thanks for all you do in that area. Is that it? All right, next in the city manager's report, and I think you specifically have one item for sure you want to cover, right, Steve?
And a few others quickly. You may have heard this already, but Mike Dingman, Officer Mike Dingman, has been promoted to the sergeant position that became available when Sergeant Robinson was promoted to lieutenant. We have received notice from the county of the agricultural conservation areas. Maybe you've read this in the paper. I'm just bringing it to your attention. If for any reason you think we need to attend a public hearing or respond on this, I just want to make sure you're aware of it. The Bangerter Farms are being considered for agricultural protection area status. And one is just outside our city limit over here. Now, when the mayor and I talked about it, we didn't see a reason to comment on it. It's not within the city limits, so, but I'm just bringing it to your attention because the city got a notice of it.
And when is it?
Well, there's 2 areas. There's 2 applications the county has received for the creation of agriculture protection areas. One is 44 acres in Farmington. That's the one you may have seen in the paper particularly. The other is 7.6 acres located at 1304 North, 400 East in Bountiful. I think that's a portion of the Bangerter farm over there, not the whole thing, but a portion of it. And so there's a public hearing on May 1st to receive public comment on the proposal.
At the courthouse?
At the 303 at the address.
Copy of that and send it to all of us.
Well,
Yeah,
61 South
Could you
Main.
just scan that in and email it out?
Okay,
So we
sure.
have that.
Yeah.
And you might not know the answer to this question, but in that process, if an applicant applies for this status, then can they unapply whenever they choose, or are they condemning themselves to forever be?
I don't know the
My
answer.
understanding is that it's a one-way street, but I can't say that
Interesting.
I've
That's
researched it.
Pretty big decision. Okay.
Well, I won't be going to the public hearing, but I'd be on record as saying I think it's a great idea. Local sourcing of food is a problem, and it's important to maintain that. And eminent domain, again, I'm looking at the paper, so all apologies to Farmington City Council. Eminent domain is a very dangerous power to use for the purposes that have been reported.
All right.
I may or may not have expressed that at the Transportation Committee.
You may or may not.
Transportation, a corridor is different, but the purpose is stated for eminent domain to acquire some soccer fields. It's just, that's a dangerous use.
No, I meant about the farms. There was a lot of important people there.
I do have some concern about attending something like that and making a comment, and that comment being interpreted as reflecting a Centerville endorsement or
Well, so I'm certainly
in either
not,
direction.
I'm certainly not inclined to go and wasn't planning to.
What time is that public hearing?
I don't know.
Because that's
My wife's told me I'm attending, so.
Oh, she did?
It's the same night as
I thought
our
you'd
city
be there.
council meeting, isn't it?
I think if you do want to comment and just make the statement beforehand that you're there as an individual citizen and not representing the city, then.
It's May 1st at 10 a.m.
Oh, morning.
They
Okay.
have their meetings in the morning, the county commission.
Okay.
I knew I could go, I just didn't know what time it was. I just have some concern, even if you make that kind of a statement.
Okay, the next item, oh, I'm sorry, are we ready to go on?
And so I'm curious if anybody has any comment.
I've actually made statements in other cities on request on issues related to Utopia and UIA, and I do identify myself as a board member, as a city council member, and I'm not speaking on behalf of either, I'm speaking as a private citizen. That's about the best disclosure I can make.
I think that's the perfect approach because I appreciate your concern, but I also appreciate that we should be able to continue to practice our rights as the individual citizen and using our voice in that way, so.
I agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
I could give a story, but maybe I'll give it another time. But great story that we'd all like. Go ahead.
Okay, the next item is just quickly, the Parks Committee has picked 7 movies for this summer, and these are in a insert and utility bill that we've got to finalize tomorrow, so I'm just running these by you in case there's some objection, hopefully not. Sing, I've never heard that one. Sing.
Just a cute little cartoon, very
Yeah.
Greatest Showman.
That was great.
I've seen that one.
Done that twice.
Ferdinand, Coco, The Last Jedi, Black Panther, and Trek.
And we're getting into this all for how much? Those
We
are
got
some
these are
big
current.
ticket movies.
Some still in the theaters.
Yeah, actually, you'll see a request for a little more money for the Parks Committee.
Only just a little bit, and the Trek showing is actually at no cost. The director of that movie lives in Centerville, and he's going to do a night similar to what T.C. Christensen did with the movie that he did, so with
And-
the director there and speaking to the crowd, and that'll be fun.
A significant amount of Trek was shot, well, I don't know
In
about
the
significant amount.
community part.
Yeah, some of it in.
And the initial scene is up around the corner from our house. And there was some damage done to the property in conjunction with the shoot. The homeowner called me very irate, but the people came back and came back and came back until they'd fixed it to his satisfaction.
Okay.
And he praises them now.
Okay, so I just wanted to run those by you in case there's any serious objection before that list goes out. Then my last thing is scheduling work sessions. Now, we not only need budget work sessions, but the Planning Commission is wanting to meet with the City Council to discuss their goals, to see if what the City Council's reaction and support would be for those goals. And then you have this cemetery work session, which I'm suggesting maybe that could be put off a month or so until we get past these others. Maybe that's into June or something like that.
Well, the budget, too.
But the budget, we've got to do, the budget work sessions we need to do in the first part of May. I'm going to recommend that you identify 2 dates for budget work session. The first one, let me just try this on you, that you take a 3-hour block on a night without a council meeting, and it would, May 8th, Tuesday, May 8th.
That is the museum storytelling. Chief Child will be the speaker.
Oh, and that, it starts at what time?
That starts at 7.
Okay.
And I have Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec that night, okay.
But Tuesday, but I mean, it is a better night for me than many other nights.
The other one I was going to suggest was the 15th, which is your regular council meeting night. We'd just have a budget session before the meeting that night.
How about if we do 5 to 7 on Tuesday the 8th, and then if we need more time.
And then on the 15th before the regular meeting? How does that sound? That would fit our timetable in that I need to put together a budget newsletter by the 20th of May, a utility bill insert that goes in the utility bill at the end of May, giving highlights of the tentative budget and advertising the public hearing. And by having these work sessions with you in advance, then you can give me direction on what's important to include in that insert, along with just normal summary and highlights. So, what about that then? 5 to 7 on the 8th, and then before the council meeting on the 15th? Okay, I like that.
So are we going to get it to look at before the 8th?
Oh, yeah, you'll get it on the 1st. I have to, by law, give you my proposed budget in the first meeting in May, which is May 1st.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me just make a note of this. May 8th, 5 to 7. May 15th, 5:30. That's probably about as early as, well, we'll talk about it on the 8th, what time you want to start on the 15th, whether it's 5 or 5:30. I think I do have a couple of department heads. I know I have at least one. I probably have two who would like a little bit of face time with you. So I'll probably schedule them on the 8th at the beginning of that. That's the police chief and the public works director. I'll let them make their pitches and have their face time with you. And then we'll go on to the big picture and from there. Okay, so how this work session with the Planning Commission. I talked to Corey today about that. I asked him have it just on the same night as a Planning Commission meeting or a separate night. He would prefer that you have it on a night by itself. Because he thinks that if it's on a night prior to the Planning Commission meeting, it won't get to a conclusion, if you will. Well, that might mean the 22nd or the 29th, Tuesday the 22nd or Tuesday the 29th. What about one of those options?
I'm also available the Wednesdays of those weeks, if that helps anyone.
Wednesday the 23rd would be Planning Commission night. But you could go the 30th, 29th or 30th.
I believe the 30th would be better for me. A Wednesday night later in the month is better for me.
I have a son graduating high school, and I think that's probably seminary graduation, so. But you guys could go, but that might take
Well,
me.
I would think
I could run back and forth.
We could go into June with that one, I don't think.
What was wrong with the 22nd?
Tuesday the 22nd. What's the reaction?
Nothing was wrong with it. I was just opening up both days and saying.
No, I heard you say that, but did somebody say no on the 22nd?
No.
I would prefer to stay a little further away from the Memorial Day weekend.
So how's the 22nd?
That is
Any objections to the 22nd? Okay. And then we'll just look into June for
So you're
cemetery.
gonna put that at 5:30?
Well, I was thinking maybe 6 to 9 or 6 to 8, 6 to 8:30, something
That's
like
what
that.
the Planning Commission, laying out their goals that they're excited about.
Yeah, and they need to know whether you support those goals or not, how you prioritize them.
And are we going to get their list of goals ahead of time as well?
Yeah, we certainly can do
Like,
that.
I'd like as much advance notice to ponder on that before we actually talk.
And did we
Yes.
decide, what did we decide, 6 to 8, 8:30, 9?
Well, do you want to start at 5:30 or 6? What's best for those of you who have to come in from Salt Lake?
I don't care, just let me know.
It's five-
Same here.
I would say 5:30, especially be there 5:30 so we can start eating and try to get everyone there as close to 5:30 as possible.
Yeah, we do have some planning commissioners that are also coming from work.
And maybe we just bump it to 6 to be safe.
Yeah, well, let's say 5:45 dinner and
Just say 5:45.
5:45 start it? Okay.
Because then we'll maybe start by 6.
Yeah.
5:45, okay, going once, going twice, all right, 5:45, send the proposed goals well in advance. Okay, I think that's all we need to do right now. Mayor, that's it.
Thank you. Anybody see item 12? Anybody see any reason for closed meeting?
No.
Okay. I have a couple appointments 2 weeks from now, but I'm only behind on 2, so we'll get them caught up. So I don't have anything on item 13, so do we have a motion to adjourn and then then go into a short RDA meeting?
Motion to adjourn to an RDA meeting without the intent to come back.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Done.
How short is it? Can we do 10 o'clock?
Oh, yeah, no, this is, should be real short. Because you already approved one action, you just need to approve it as an RDA, and the other is minutes.
Okay, so are we ready? So this is an RDA meeting, and we convened. Do we need a roll call? I guess we do, don't we? So starting with Councilwoman Ivy.
Here.
Present.
Here.
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 Here. We're all present. The first thing on the agenda is the minutes review and acceptance from the April 3rd, 2018 RDA meeting.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to approve the April 3rd, 2018 RDA minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the second item on the agenda is approve the assignment and assumption agreement for Centerville Corporate Park subdivision. Were you addressing that?
Well, just the same agreement you approved in the summary action calendar as a council, but the RDA also needs to approve it.
Okay, is everybody aware of that? Any further discussion on that?
Motion to approve the assumption and assignment agreement between the city, RDA, Dayton West LLC, and J&S Purpura Ventures LLC for Lot 1 and Lot 201 of the Centerville Corporate Park.
Second.
Second, let's do a roll call vote, starting at the end with Councilwoman Meekum.
Aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0.
Motion to adjourn the RDA.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
RDA is adjourned.
We'll beat
It's an
10
early
o'clock.
night. It's not yet 10.
All right.
Okay.